They call it 7-0.
7
so
o'clock?
it's-
Thank you, Michaela. I'm going to call the meeting of the Personnel Administrative Affairs Committee to get to order. If we could be quiet in the gallery, please. Today is Monday, June 6, 2022, and it's 7 p.m. We are in the Aldermanic Chamber. It's also available via Zoom teleconference. To access Zoom, please refer to the agenda or the city's website for the meeting link. Can we start with a roll call, please?
Alderman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
I'm here.
Alderman at Large Ben Clemens.
Here.
Alderman Tyler Govia.
Here.
Alderman Tom Lopez.
Here.
Alderman Tebow is here. We also have the mayor, Mayor Donchis, Director Matt Sullivan, Director Tim Cummings, Alderman Klee, Alderman Dowd, and Alderman Camo. So we're all present.
I'm trying to go fast. Get all of these people. Okay. The first item of business is public comment. Is there anyone in the chamber that would like to speak? Please come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you. And if there's any on Zoom, I'll come to you after.
My name is Bob Keating, 5 Coburn Woods, a member of Granite State Organizing Project and the Unitarian Universalist Church of Nashua. I'm speaking about an item coming up today about the eligibility and criteria for the Housing Trust Fund, and I want to appreciate all of the effort that made that come to this point, and appreciate the diversity in terms of the recommendations for members on that commission. And the only comment, and I don't think it needs to be changed at this point in time, I think that there's enough flexibility in it, is that nowhere is it defined what affordable housing is. And as we know, that term is used very widely and meaning a great many different things to people. And what their hope is that, for our hope from Granite State Organizing Project, is that a significant portion, when the criteria comes before the full board eventually, that a large portion of that would be put to people who would be below the average median income. So thanks again for all the work over a long period of time to get here, and I hope the encouragement to give large amount of monies from the ARP, $10 million is a figure that had been given. I hope that that's continuing in people's minds. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, honorable members of the board, my name is Francis Murphy. I live at 72 Berkeley Street, and I rise to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance to establish the Greeley Park Advisory Committee. I am familiar with the terms of the proposed ordinance, and I note that the one member is assigned or reserved for the Lower Merrimack River Local Advisory Committee, LMRLAC. I'm the current chair of that. And so I'm familiar with the role of an advisory committee. I know advisory committees can make no decisions. They advise, they participate in debates about things. In this instance, it would be about Greeley Park, presumably to preserve, protect, and enhance the park. I envision that committee to do that, to advocate for the protection, preservation of Greeley Park, just like the advisory committee does for Mine Falls, the President Advisory Committee. The Stonehouse in Greeley Park is probably the most photographed spot in the city. I know it is in disrepair right now, and so I would look forward to the advisory committee advocating for its repair and restitution. I would like to see the advisory committee, if it's adopted, to advocate for a master plan for Greeley Park that would sort of govern going forward, what goes in, what goes out of the park. Finally, I have researched the origins of Greeley Park from the farm that was gifted by Joseph Thornton Greeley to the city back in the 19th century, and the gift by Joseph Cotton that resulted in the Stonehouse. The layout of the park was the result of input from the famous architectural firm, Boston, New York, Frederick Law Olmsted, who was responsible in the 19th century and 20th centuries for creation of city parks around the nation, including New York's Central Park, Boston's Emerald Necklace, and our own Greeley Park, Frederick Law Olmsted. We got a history. We would do well to remember the history of Greeley Park and the Olmsted spirit that was responsible for the original design and layout of Greeley Park. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope the ordinance passes.
Thank you. Anyone else from the chamber who'd like to speak? Please come to the microphone.
Hi, my name is Tanya Nisley. I am a resident at 83 Major Drive and a member of the Granite State Organizing Project and just a community volunteer. I just want to speak in behalf of the Housing Trust Fund and just want to support it. And I just wanted to just bring attention to the word affordable housing again. I'm hoping as we move forward with this Housing Trust Fund that we can understand in order to help the most vulnerable people in Nashua that need this, we might want to change the terminology to income-based instead of affordable because of the large number of people that are not making a minimum wage that is a livable wage. So I would like everyone to take that into consideration and possibly make that a thing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else from the chamber who'd like to speak?
Hi, I'm Reverend Sally Newhall. I live at 33 Digital Drive, Unit 308, if you need to know that, here in Nashua. And I was rising to speak about the Housing Trust Fund, which I'm really excited that we're getting a Housing Trust Fund. I'm delighted it's happening. I echo that we need to be aware of affordable housing in Nashua. And I want to expand our thinking about what affordable means, because affordable, yes, means those who are working at minimum wage or below, and we have folks like that in Nashua. But right now, it costs so much to live in Nashua that even someone we hire as a beginning teacher or a beginning police officer cannot afford, unless they have a spouse earning more money, to buy housing at the affordable going rate in Nashua. We need to support more housing so that even our median income members of our community can afford to live in Nashua. It's ridiculous to hire people to work for our city and then for them not to be able to find housing in our city. I really hope that the plans that I understand are going forward for the Housing Trust Fund for the board that would handle that would include members of the city, and I hope that you can I hope that you're going to look for a wide variety of folks to be on that board to represent the needs and concerns of the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else from the chamber? Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak during public comment? Okay. We are going to move on to communications.
None.
Interviews. So for the Board of Registrars.
Board of Registrars, we have William Grady,
14.
14 Tinker Road, Nashua, New Hampshire, 03064. Thank you. Term to expire May 1st, 2025.
Great. Mayor Don, just so you know, some of the people who were not in the chamber are on Zoom.
Pardon?
Some of the people who are not in the chamber are on Zoom.
Oh, okay. All right, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I just noticed.
Well, I'm here to nominate, or I have nominated, William Grady to the Board of Registrars. The Board of Registrars is a 3-person board that oversees the voter checklists and voter registration in general. Mr. Grady has expressed a strong interest in serving on the board, and we've definitely been looking for someone. Currently, we have 2 members. And were Mr. Grady confirmed, we would then have a partisan balance. Mr. Grady is a registered Republican. We have a registered Democrat, and my understanding is the 3rd person is undeclared. But the ordinance says you can't have more than 2 people of one party. Mr. Grady you can see from his resume, a long business background. He's a member of the Rotary Club. He went to Bishop Gurdon High School. Obviously, a lot of knowledge regarding the city. And again, is very enthusiastic about making sure that we register as many people as we can, and that everybody that possibly can will go ahead and vote. So with that, I will give you Mr. Grady, who can tell you a little more about himself and who will answer your questions, of course.
Thank you. Mr. Grady, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Chairman, Kelly. I feel very excited about to serve the city of Nashua. Being born and raised here, this is a city that cares. This is a city that is a community. Whether or not you're coming from outside, like my parents did in 1959 and raised a family of 4, and found the opportunities here twofold. Not only be able to give back to the community, but also live a great life and quality of life that's been basically been put together by a lot of dedicated people over the years. And part of giving that back is ensuring that the vote, which is sacrosanct, which is basically the ability to incorporate as many people as possible, sharing their voice about the betterment not only of our country, but our state, and certainly for our city. I take this as a very honorable role. I look forward to serving with my fellow registrars to make sure this vote is accurate, is maintained, and also expanded to as many possible people as possible to celebrate our great country in voting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grady. I'm going to open it up and just move the mic a little bit closer to you so everybody can hear you when you speak. You can physically move it on the desk. Yeah, they're very directional. Okay.
Thank you.
Members of the board who have questions? I know Alderwoman Clee wanted to speak. I knew you were instrumental in bringing Mr. Brady forward, so go ahead. Grady, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And yes, when I sat here in the aldermanic chamber one day, and it was brought to our attention that we only had 2 members on the Board of Registrars. And I immediately looked to see what parties they were from, because I knew we needed to have equity. And I saw that we had, truthfully, I thought we had 2 Democrats. I didn't realize that one was an independent and so on. So I knew that we needed to have at least 1 Republican. There are a number of Republicans that I know that would be very qualified for this, but Mr. Grady's name bubbled right up to the top for me. He, as you've heard me say before, when I first met him, he honestly put me through my paces. Someone had said, you need to speak to him, and I said, okay, and I had asked to have my sign put on his lawn and so on, and he said, not until we have a conversation. And it wasn't the regular conversation of, what do you stand for? He questioned me, and he was actually one of the first people I spoke to, and as I said, he put me through my paces. He let me know that he was an engaged voter, and that he was the kind of person who just didn't say, okay, well, you're for this, you're for that. Why are you for it? That was the question he kept asking, was why? So I learned when I went and spoke to people, I almost started with why I feel the way I feel and why I want to do what I want to do. I think that earned me respect from other people, and I do fully give him credit for that, because he taught me that the why is more important than the what in this particular case. And he used to be in Ward 3. He is now in Alderman Dowd's ward, Ward 2. Alderman Dowd, you're lucky to have him there. He is very engaged, and he'll put you through your paces too. I got many a call going, why? why is this happening? Or why are we voting? Or what is your stance on this? He didn't just let me sit back and be an alderman or a state rep. He asked those whys, and he asked the hard questions. So I think he's perfect for this position, and I hope that you'll look upon him favorably. Thank you.
Questions from the committee? Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. I too have had the opportunity to engage with Mr. Grady before, and I think it was a pleasant experience. You know, I think he has the integrity that this board demands. And when I say that, there's a lot of people out there who want to believe that there is nefarious things going on in our elections. And I'm not gonna speak to the rest of the country, but I will speak to Nashua. And it doesn't happen here. And that's because we have people that care about the process, that care about, doing things the right way. We have strong traditions here, and we have people who are in positions of power that care about the process and that care about voting. And Mr. Grady will certainly bring, or keep that tradition moving forward in a nonpartisan manner. I have full confidence in that, and I support him 100%.
Thank you.
Alderman Lopez.
I couldn't think of a why question, so what do you think, other than why, but what do you think we can do better in improving our process for the volunteers, for the people who are working the polls, accessibility for individuals that are trying to vote, and then transparency afterwards?
Thank you for the question, Alderman Lopez. I think the leveraging of technology, as we've seen the past 2 years, and expanding people's voices and understanding from a webinar perspective or instruction, and certainly allow people to voice how they can actually improve the process. But I think basically the best practices can be portrayed on a wide basis. As I think it would be a great part of our committee, and I've done some studying of the past meeting minutes of expanding the outreach, not only downtown, but through all the different type of festivals. I think would be a great idea. Let's take that same idea and concept and expand it out to ETV. Let's put that out there. Let's talk to people, let's have a dialogue about it, and have an interaction. But certainly when you have a Zoom meeting like today with the interaction expanded, we can talk about those issues, we can put a committee together, and can actually formulate a plan that can have multiple outreach a number of people and actually speak to what we got in improvements. That's what I would do, leveraging technology, which I've had to do the past 2 years, being in sales and working across the world literally, and working with people and collaborating and winning, not only their ideas, but also ideas I didn't agree with, but we built a consensus all over by technology. I would rather us have interpersonal like we are this evening, but the reality of the situation, people live online, people access online. Let's make that information and improve the overall process online as well too, specifically.
I appreciate that answer, and I'm looking forward to supporting your nomination.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. I appreciate that.
Anyone else? Committee members? Non-committee aldermen? Okay. I just want to thank you for, first of all, for bringing Mr. Grady forward, and I thought that your speech at the beginning was spot on for someone who would be on the Board of Registrars. I especially love to hear the idea of expanding that voting ability and getting as many people registered to vote that want to vote, because it's really important that people get out and vote. So it sounds like you will be a great addition, and you will, work in a nonpartisan fashion to make sure that everybody has that right. So thank you for coming forward.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Alderman Dowd.
I just want to welcome you to Ward 2, and I look forward to the why questions.
You didn't have to vote.
Thanks for your service to the city of Nashua.
Thank you. We'll take up your nomination at the end of interview period. So thank you.
So now Mr. Whithue would hopefully come up.
I'm going to have him read into the record. So Conservation Commission.
Conservation Commission, Richard Whithue, 23 Syracuse Road, Nashua, New Hampshire, 03064, with a term to expire May 1st, 2025.
Yeah, you can come join us right in the horseshoe. Thank you. Get in a comfy chair. All right.
Thank you for allowing me to appear before you tonight. I live at 23 Syracuse Road. I've lived there for since 1986. I've been attending the Nashua Conservation Commission meetings for the past 5 months, gone on site walks with them and volunteered for work days with them. I am a land steward for the Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests and some property over in Wilton, Temple, Mason. And I decided it was time for me to spend time really right around here and pay attention more to Nashua. I'm a member of the Nashua River Watershed Association, New Hampshire Audubon, and several other state environmental organizations. And I've been learning online presentations and in-person nature walks about forestry, plants, wildlife, ecology, and hydrology. And also learning quite a lot from the Conservation Commission meetings, learning from the other members about what details about when people bring their projects forward. Well, I appreciate your consideration.
And I would add, in addition to what Mr. Whithue said, that he has talked with Sherry Dutsey, a very active chair of the Conservation Commission, and as he said, has attended a lot of meetings. Ms. Dutsey is very enthusiastic about Richard's nomination. I've nominated him to be an alternate member because the regular members are, those positions are filled, but as an alternate, he will be able to participate very actively as he already has been doing as a volunteer.
Great. I'll open it up to any questions or comments from the committee. Alderman Clee? Oh, did I say hand over there? Go ahead, Alderman Dowd.
Well, I can verify that he was at the last Conservation Commission meeting because we had a discussion about the plantings for the new school. And in fact, they even tried to get him to vote, but he hasn't been sworn in yet. So I think he'll be an outstanding candidate. And I just wanted to let everybody know, including yourself, that we finally got the wetlands permit from the state of New Hampshire and the wetlands permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. So all engines ahead full. So.
Thanks for yielding, Alderwoman Clee. Go ahead.
Absolutely, Madam Chairwoman. Full disclosure, Mr. Whithue is a Ward 3 resident who has not been transferred over to Ward 2. Thank goodness. I lost 1,200 residents to Ward 2, but and I can affirm that I have seen Mr. Whithue in many emails and so on relative to his name and so on about this. I think he would be a good candidate, and I think it would be a positive action. I know that many members, such as Chairwoman Dutsey, has spoken very highly of him and so on. So I think it definitely a good choice.
Thank you,
Madam Chair. Well, clearly, upon looking out in your background, you have a passion for the outdoors and the environment and the conservation of not just Nashua, but the surrounding area. I think you'll make a great asset to the committee. Thank you for volunteering.
Anyone else? I'll just make a comment. I was on the Conservation Commission in the beginning of my first term, and it is a group of highly intelligent people. It's so interesting to sit in those meetings. And your background is so perfectly matched. So really appreciate you coming forward, and I know you'll do great on the committee. Commission.
Thank you.
Thank you. So go ahead.
All right, for the Cultural Connections Committee, we have on Zoom Claudia Decker, 59 Robinson Road, Hudson, New Hampshire, 03051, term to expire May 24th, 2025.
Okay, and Mayor Duchess, you want to speak to your nomination first? I know Claudia is on Zoom.
Oh, so Claudia is on Zoom, okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Claudia, for coming in. I didn't see you here in the room, so I'm glad you're on Zoom. So Claudia, I have nominated to the Cultural Connections Committee. She is a Spanish teacher and has taught Spanish at Nashua North and teaches as an adjunct professor at Riviera University. She's been teaching for 22 years. She has a Master of Art in teaching Spanish, fluent in Spanish, and she is part of the New Hampshire Writers Project, and she serves on a National Advisory Council as president relating to, I think, the Spanish culture. She can pronounce the name of that organization correctly, so I'll leave that to her. And I think she's eager to serve, and I know she will be a great addition to the Cultural Connections Committee.
Thank you, Mayor Donches.
And so I will ask Ms. Decker then to tell us a little bit about yourself and of your interest in serving on the committee.
Well, first of all, as I mentioned in my biography, I was born in Colombia and raised in the United States, and I was in the Air Force. I joined the Air Force right out of high school, so I have a great love for this country. I'm so grateful to be here, always have been, and so when I left the Air Force and was able to go to college on the GI Bill, I studied languages and culture, and so had the opportunity to serve in a different way. One moment while I stop my video for a quick second. I have a bit of a speck on my face, I'm sorry about that. Anyway, I want to serve on the Cultural Connections Committee because it's an extension of what I do at school in Nashua High North. As a teacher of language and culture, I feel that it's my duty and my pleasure to educate students, not just in grammar and in vocabulary, but also in what makes, what unites us all in spite of our obvious differences. And so I've had the pleasure to volunteer for a couple of the Nashua festivals, and I just am very honored to continue serving the city in this capacity. Thank you very much for your consideration here.
Thank you, Ms. Decker. Questions or comments from the committee? Alderman Lopez.
Given that you're also an adjunct faculty at Riviere and you're involved in higher education, and Riviere University is particularly well-resourced community as well. Are you familiar with the One Greater Nashua Cultural Navigators program, and do you think there's any opportunities to partner in that community with maybe service learning students or students working on service projects, that kind of stuff?
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up. This gives me an opportunity to mention my service as president of the National Spanish Honor Society. It's pronounced the Sociedad Honoraria Hispánica of the AATSP. So as part of this organization, I get to be a chapter sponsor. And so I have a chapter of the Spanish Honor Society at Nashua High North. My chapter is 14 years old, and much of what we do is related to service to the community. At Riviere, I've been there a year, and hopefully next year, maybe we can consider opening a chapter of Sigma Delta Pi, which is Spanish Honor Society, but for college. But I do have plans to connect with Greater Nashua and to, not just from Nashua High North, but also at Riv, invite my students to do learning projects outside of the classroom that serve the community.
Alderman Lopez.
Just to clarify, the Sociedad Honoraria Hispanica is just the Hispanic Honor Society? I don't say just.
Yes,
like,
it is part of, yeah, it's part of the American Association of Teachers of Spanish and Portuguese. And so in order to have a chapter in high school or in college, you have to belong to the AATSP, and then you can open up a chapter. And the chapter's mission is to promote Hispanic culture, to our lema is todos a una, all for one, and basically to use the Spanish language and culture to extend, to go outside the classroom and to form alliances and friendships, and especially to serve community.
Well, I'm excited about the opportunities that you're bringing to build on things we're already doing, but equally excited for the opportunities that you bring to build in new ways. So thank you for your willingness to step forward.
Thank you for having me.
Other committee members? Alderman Clee, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Ms. Decker, I saw that your bio said that you went to Weber State University. Did you live in Ogden when you went there?
I lived in Ogden for quite a number of years. I attended briefly while I was in the service and could take courses while I was in, but then when I left, I went to the University of Utah and then decided to finish my studies at Weber State. I love the Weber campus.
Yeah, it's a beautiful campus. I live not too far from there in Ogden, Canyon Cove Apartments, right down the road from there. And when I was working at Thiokol with the DCAS office, so yeah, it's a beautiful school and a really good school. So, and I saw that you got your bachelor's of English through there, so I'm quite impressed.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, it's quite a diverse community as well.
Yes, it is. People, they don't realize how diverse that community is up there. And I didn't know if you had taken some online courses, if you actually had been up that way to experience all that different type of culture there. So I have to say, I don't get to vote for you here, but I will get to vote at the regular board meeting. You're quite impressive hearing what you had to say, and I think much of what Alderman Lopez questions had asked, I think you will be definitely I don't want to say a force to be reckoned with, but I think you will bring some great ideas to the commission, so thank you for stepping up.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I also want to say thank you for stepping forward. You sound very impressive and, the right fit for this Cultural Connections Committee. I do have a logistical question, so just bear with me, but I know that this committee meets at 8 a.m. on a school day, and I know you're a school teacher. Are you going to be able to make the meetings? Because I know they have had issues in the past with quorum.
So they record the Zoom meetings, and so if I'm not able to attend, I just go back and look at the meetings and I forward my notes to the chair. Right now the chair is Elizabeth Berry from NCC. And if I happen to have a plan, I can jump in for a few minutes, but of course with all of my teacherly duties, I couldn't possibly devote the entire hour to a meeting, but I do stay in touch via email with the committee members.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Any additional questions? Okay, we'll take up your nomination at the end of our interview period.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to the National Arts Commission, we have three. The first one is Joseph Olaforitz. Sorry about that. 35 Newbury Street, Nashua, New Hampshire, 03060. Term to expire May 31st, 2025, and I believe he's on Zoom.
He is on Zoom. Mayor Donches, would you please introduce your...
Is Joseph on Zoom?
He is.
I am, yes.
There he is.
All right, well, Joseph will be a great addition to the Nashua Arts Commission. He is the music director at First Church, where he does a really fantastic job. But if you look at his experience and his resume, you will see that he has vast experience with the performing arts, with orchestras specifically at various locations in Europe. He spends, 6 months a year in Europe, or you have been doing that back and forth?
3 to 4, yeah.
3 or 4 months in Europe with various orchestras over there. And he is incredibly knowledgeable about music. And I think, given his very extensive background, will be a great addition to the National Arts Commission.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If I can just take a moment to introduce myself. Joseph Olaforovich is my name. My career started in 1994 after graduating from Ithaca College, actually conducting the German incarnations of several Broadway companies in Europe. Actually, the boom of that industry coming into the European scene beyond London, where I've probably 3 or 4 custom-built new theaters and been part of, in terms of the design process and that kind of thing, moving on towards more crossover in classical music and film music while living in Berlin in the late 90s. Actually, 23 years ago yesterday, we opened the first incarnation of Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame as a new musical. So that has gone through many other things. And since 2008, I've lived in Nashua as a resident of the city on 35 Newbury Street, and have been the minister of music of the First Church of Nashua, and as well established the church's first music concert series as its artistic director, which will enter its 15th season this coming fall. So on the broad spectrum of traditional performing arts, I have a lot of experience. I'm also a trained theatrical lighting designer, which would have been the other career had the podium not taken my attention. And otherwise, I'm looking forward to serving on the Arts Commission as someone that has a professional profile both here and abroad, and serving the city of Nashua in the capacity that the Arts Commission needs for voices that are active in the arts.
Great, thank you very much. Committee members with questions or comments? Alderman Lopez.
First, I would like to congratulate you on the pun, voices active in the arts. And then second, I just wanted to know what your impressions of various facilities that we have here in the city are for small group or larger art performances. I know that we're looking at the Keefe Auditorium, and it's whatever we're going to do in terms of Elm Street's development process. And then additionally, Court Street as a performance space. Can you speak to your impressions of that, whether we can do more with these spaces, whether we should, which ones we should particularly work to preserve?
Certainly, I'd love to speak to that. I won't speak to the new Performing Arts Center because I did write an op-ed for the Telegraph back in early 2020 that kind of speaks of my thoughts on that. But you bring up two facilities, one in particular that's very dear to my heart, the Keefe Auditorium. I'm concerned about the Keefe's future with it transitioning away from being a school. It was at one time, if not still is, New Hampshire's largest theatrical facility in terms of audience capacity. I believe there is great potential there, but I've learned recently some of the great challenges of cost that would integrate separating the Keefe from its main building in terms of utilities and building and that kind of thing. I'll speak briefly to Court Street in that I think I stepped into Court Street the first time 12 or 13 years ago and was quite surprised at how it is this little diamond in the rough, really kind of a venue that has a lot of potential, but it came out of, I'm assuming, the late 70s, early 80s, big theatrical push for what they call thrust theaters, which is a three-sided sort of performance space that can do smaller venues. I'm fascinated that the theater actually has ballet studios and a black box theater in the lower level that are currently unused. I think the balance of Keefe, Court Street, New Performing Arts Center can allow various different performances for various groups to be here. One of my largest concerns, and I know she's on the nomination of the commission as well, is that a professional organization like Symphony New Hampshire may find some difficulty in a performance space in Nashua if the Keefe comes out of the portfolio of Nashua's performing arts culture. So I think on that level, the Keefe is one of the big concerns or big loves on my end, having actually played with the symphony for a number of years as its acting principal keyboard early on in my tenure here, also having conducted the organization for a Pops concert a number of years ago. So Alderman Lopez, I hope that gives a little bit of a broad overview, and if I missed something in explanation or intent, please let me know.
Thanks for your input. I look forward to singing your praises metaphorically when it's time to vote.
Always with the puns. Other aldermen with questions or comments? Alderman Glee.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. As the liaison to the Arts Commission, I welcome you to that commission. I think you bring a lot of background. You're not shy on your opinion, as we've all heard, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, because things like that challenge people to think a little differently. So I appreciate that. I know we've had a few emails that have gone back and forth at times, and we're not always on the same page, but that's a good thing again, because it does make people think differently. So I do appreciate a lot that you've done for this community. I think you will be a great asset when it even comes to talking about things like the Keefe. I say let's protect and do as much as we can for it, as well as Court Street. I think the more the merrier in here. And your resume is quite amazing, from your musical background to your theater background and so on. The board currently has amazing people on it, and I think that you will work really well with them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Tua.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Sorry, I missed you before.
Yeah, it's all right, that's all right, I'm only here. I'm not gonna try the last name again, I'm gonna have to say it at least one more time. But I thank you for stepping up. I too, like Alderman Lopez, I am concerned about the two buildings that we spoke of, 14 Court Street and Keefe Auditorium, because there's a misunderstanding out there that the three venues that we're going to have are the same thing and can be interchangeable, and that's just not true. So I appreciate those answers to Alderman Lopez, and I will be supporting this nomination. So thank you for serving.
Thank you.
Alderman Kamal.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So Joseph's the reason why I dragged myself out of the house tonight to come
Keep that a secret.
and offer my support of his nomination. A couple of months ago, he reached out directly to me and asked if I'd be interested in sitting down with him so that he could give me some theater and arts for dummies, because admittedly it's not something I know a whole lot about. And so we did meet and spoke for some time, and his breadth of knowledge on the arts and the theater community in the city is, in my limited experience, second to none. Just looking at his Facebook page and seeing some of the symphonies that he's worked with is beyond impressive. So I'm very excited for his nomination. He even mentioned back then how excited he was to potentially be on this commission, so I'm glad to see his name come forward, and I look forward to voting on it at the next full meeting.
Thanks, Alderman Kamal. Anybody else? I'll put in my thoughts here at the end. Thank you for coming forward. It was very clear that you're very passionate about musical arts and you know what you get to do every day, and just how you talked about it. I was on the board of the symphony, so I also know what that's like. I'm a big music fan, but also have similar concerns about Keefe, the new Performing Arts Center, and Church Street, or 14 Court Street, and what is going to happen with all of those, because each individual theater brings something different, and as you pointed out, they have very different uses. So looking forward to having your voice on the commission, and we can work on that all together.
Thank you so much.
We'll take up your nomination at the end. I think we have Deanna next.
Yep.
Right? Turn the page.
Yep. Deanna Hoying, also for the Arts Commission, 361 Whitford Street, Manchester, New Hampshire, 03104, term to expire May 31st, 2025.
Well, I'm here to introduce you to Deanna Hoying, who's the new Executive Director of Symphony New Hampshire. And so that alone makes her very qualified and capable of being on the Nashua Arts Commission. But if you look at her resume, she has a degree in performance, a musical performance, I think the French horn. And she has served at the Symphony New Hampshire in various capacities for around 3 years. She also has been with many other orchestras and opera companies in various locations, Kentucky, Louisville, and elsewhere around the United States. And so with her experience, she and Joseph together will be able to really give us some good advice. I suspect they know each other. And so I'm really pleased to be able to nominate Deanna, and I'm glad she's willing to serve. And I guess I would ask you to tell us a little bit more and about yourself.
Thank you, Mayor Donches. Madam Chairwoman, Alderman, thank you so much for letting me speak tonight. As the mayor has mentioned, I've been in arts and music education for more than 30 years. I've been a performer, I've been a music educator, I've lived in lots of parts of the country, and I've been involved in arts administration now for quite some time with various opera companies and orchestras. So it's my honor to be heading now Symphony New Hampshire. The 22-23 season is going to be our 100th anniversary. In April of 2023, we celebrate 100 years, and all 100 of those years, we have had a presence in this city. And so I think we're very excited about this opportunity to look back at our history and to celebrate all that has been accomplished with the arts. And I also serve as a board member for Arts for New Hampshire. In particular, my role is as advocacy chair, and so I'm also the state arts captain for New Hampshire for Americans for the Arts. So I recognize the value and importance of advocacy on behalf of all of the arts. We know that a vibrant arts community is representative and serves a vibrant city, and I think being on the Arts Commission would be an opportunity to make sure that we are able to advocate for and support all of the arts in Nashua.
Thank you, Tiana. Questions for the committee? Alderwoman Cleave.
Thank you again, Madam Chairwoman. I actually did not expect to speak to all of them, but being the liaison to the Arts Commission, I do appreciate you stepping up and as the previous speaker, I think you will be a great asset to it. Your resume, you speak to community outreach, and you spoke about advocacy. Sometimes that's one of the biggest issues when it comes to the arts. People think that the arts is just kind of like fluff. I mean, when we went to school, what was the thing that they cut first when they needed money was the arts programs and so on. So it's very important to get the community engaged, get them engaged in positive, looking towards this as how it brings vibrancy as well as money into the city. I know one of the comments that were made with the master plan, so to speak, that the Arts Commission did was, why do we keep talking about the money of it? And for the average person, that's what they see. I'm much like Madam Chairwoman here, who I love the theater. I love listening to music. I love seeing the artwork we have throughout the city. But again, some people just think of that. So my question to you with a long introduction is, how would you work to get a better community outreach, to get a positive note to the community, as well as to get more art people engaged with the commission and so on? Do you have ideas on that? Yeah.
I do. Most of my background has been in our education and community engagement, and I think one of the things that we need to do is meet the people where they are. You know, oftentimes we expect people to come to us wherever we are, but sometimes we also need to be able to go to where they are and understand where they're coming from, and also help them understand the role that the arts play in a vibrant community. I mean, there's a lot of research out there about the role of the arts in healthy cities and actually at the federal level, they're looking at the fact that cities with arts communities that have rebounded faster, they've seen the economy rebound faster because the arts were able to generate people coming back and coming out. And so there's actual data behind all of this information that we have. And so I think helping people understand that it's not fluff. It's not, I mean, it's part of our human experience. It's how we share things. And I think if anything that the pandemic has taught us when we were all separated and cloistered in our homes, that we need that connection. However we experience that shared connection, whether it's in a symphony hall, watching theater together, going to see great works of art, having those opportunities for people to remind themselves about how important that sharing is. And again, meeting them where they are, not always expecting them to come to our hall. Maybe we find ways to go out and play in, churches and synagogues and community centers and schools, and opportunities again to meet everybody where they are. And then it's great if they want to come and see us play in the halls, but I think the opportunity for us to go out and really meet them is what we need to do a little bit more, and I think we can do that.
Just quick.
Sure.
I'm so happy that you said meet them where they are, because one of the complaints that we do get from citizens throughout the city is that all the arts is downtown. You're forgetting about these. So when you brought up the fact of going to the community centers or going to the schools and so on, to introduce that and to bring that forward and to show the community. And sometimes it's not performances. Sometimes it may be a sculpture. Sometimes it may be a piece of artwork and so on. So I'm really glad that you said bring it to where they are rather than asking them to come here. So thank you so much. Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alderman Lopez? That was hesitant.
Yeah, to build on the art is not fluff feeling.
That's going to be a T-shirt, right? We're going to have that now. It says art is not fluff.
The brand fluff. So I, as a clinician, obviously, and with a background in school counseling, our brain-based learning and multiple intelligence theory plays a number of roles. Symphony music is understood to help cultivate brain development in infants and toddlers, and it's essential as a processing tool in addition as well. But different cultures approach music differently and have their own different experiences. And so when you're saying meet people where they are, I can see it being very important, not only physically, but culturally. I know there's some opportunities on Ash Street, for example, at Los Amigos Park. We have a round stage, which is a backdrop, and then an audio, we have a electric source. So you could do little symphonies in the park or musical presentations that people could come to. We have any number of nonprofit organizations like the Boys and Girls Club or PAL or Girls Inc. That have communities and have a forum for that. But what is the partnership that you get from elected officials with regards to that? Do you ever have people invite you to places or things? And can we do a better job of that as aldermen, of saying, okay, we represent this neighborhood as local ward aldermen. What can we do to help you connect with the features unique in your environment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In my experience, we haven't had a lot of that, and of course, the last couple of years has been a little weird about how we manage all of our community engagement. But I do think it's something that we could. Usually, we are approached by organizations. So we have Beaverbrook approaches us. We've had the London Dairy Historical Society approach us. We have typically those kinds of groups say, "Hey, we'd love to have you guys come and do this, that, or the other thing." But I think there's certainly an opportunity to do a little more out in specific areas that we're not really aware of until someone says, hey, we've got this space. Obviously, we have some limitations as far as what our musicians need to be able to do as far as heating and cooling and that kind of stuff as far as outdoor side opportunities. But I think if the more we can get that information from you, we can certainly tailor a program and an organization and a group, an ensemble to come out and do something with you. It is something that our music director and I have been talking about anyway, is about having a more multicultural approach. Yes, we're going to still do the classics, but we're also looking at a wide and diverse group of composers, both past and present, looking at different kinds of music. There's so much, I hate labeling it classical because it's music. And yes, it's a particular genre of music, but I think music is music. And the more we can showcase a diversity of our composers, we're always going to do Mozart and Beethoven, but I also want to do, living composers, and I want to do Florence Price, and I want to do all kinds of things that celebrate African-American heritage. And our music director is half Indian, and we're looking to actually do in a couple of years, do a really cool Indian-based concert. We actually did one a couple of years. We did it during lockdown. We had our East Meets West, and we had an Indian group come and play with us during that time, which was fantastic. So we're gonna keep building on those opportunities to reach out and look at all these different communities and celebrate them and celebrate us.
I'm sure many of us are willing to reciprocate, and if there's anything, well, actually, I'll give you some ideas later.
I bet you will.
But I think
I'm looking forward to hearing them.
It would be helpful for us on occasion to not just ask, what can you do for us, but also say like, hey, we have these things if you ever need them.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you so much.
All set, Alderman Lopez?
Yep.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Deanna.
Thank you so much.
I'll pick up your nomination from the end of this period.
And the third one on the National Arts Commission is Lauren Spiros-Savitt, 39 Coburn Avenue, Nashua, New Hampshire, 03063, term to expire May 31st, 2025, and she is on Zoom.
All right, Mayor Donches?
She's on there.
She's there. She's here. I can't see her yet.
Is she coming on?
She has to speak.
I'm here. I can see you.
There it is.
Oh,
And hear
okay.
you.
Great. Well,
I told you she was there.
Ms. Spiros-Savitt I'm nominated her also for the Arts Commission. She has a very strong business background, which I think will be useful to the Arts Commission and the arts community. She graduated from Harvard undergrad and Columbia with an MBA, and then has had various positions in the corporate world. But most recently, she worked for New Hampshire Public Radio. She has also been active with the Nashua Soup Kitchen and Shelter as a resume writer and volunteer, and actually a member of the Board of Trustees of Symphony New Hampshire, and is an active member of the Temple Beth Abraham. So I think she will be a good addition and provide, again, some business expertise in thinking about how we can advance the arts in the city. And with that, I will ask her to tell you a little bit about herself and add anything that she thinks she'd like you to know.
Thank you, Mayor Donches. I've lived in Nashua for about 14 years, and I've been very involved in the arts throughout my life. Since arriving in Nashua, as the mayor mentioned, I've served as a trustee of Symphony New Hampshire. I also currently serve on the board of Upbeat New Hampshire. My children have been very involved in theater and Upbeat New Hampshire and in music programs in the Nashua schools. Professionally, as the mayor mentioned, I've worked in business. I've spent over 25 years in human resources and organizational development in a variety of industries. I care deeply about the arts. I care deeply about the city, and it would really be an honor to serve on the Nashua Arts Commission.
All right, thank you. Questions from ICU, Alderman Debo, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Hi, Ms. Spirasavet. I've obviously known your husband for quite a while and had some great conversations with him, so I know your family well. So we've talked a lot about music over the last couple interviewees, and I wanted to talk a little bit about art itself. We've had Positive Street Art do a lot of great things in the city, and when the barriers came and we were using that as art, people didn't like that. So I want to know if you have any ideas how to build that type of art into the city, as opposed to, we don't have any museums, we don't have any of those kind of art. We do have hangings here and there throughout the city, but I was just wondering what you thought about that part of it.
Well, I'll say that I love it. I love the paintings on the barriers. I love the murals. I would say more would be a very good thing. To be honest, I haven't thought about where else we should expand it, but I would be very much in favor of looking for opportunities to do more of that.
Great, thank you.
Other Alderman. Alderman Lopez, then Alderman.
As we are talking about street art, I would point out there's two very large parking garages with all the frontage you need in them. But I think ultimately, effective art is more often than not an expression born of positivity. And I don't necessarily mean positivity just like everything's wonderful. I was at Positive Street Art's new studio opening yesterday, and I watched expressive dance movement literally show an interpretive dance expression of hopelessness and what does that look like when people try to express it. What was interesting was the dancers trying to express hopelessness moved towards each other and ultimately ended up supporting each other. So that's where I think our arts community flourishes. So with that in mind, are there ways we can address some profound issues our community is facing, whether it's the epidemic of suicides we've been experiencing over the last couple of years, whether it's adverse childhood experiences, the trauma of going through a pandemic that we always thought was going to happen to other people and not us. Do you see ways that we can kind of pursue ways to kind of explore those issues through art? And is that something that you think the Art Commission might be able to show leadership with?
So I'm very new to the Art Commission, the Arts Commission. I've only been to 2 meetings, but I would say, certainly that's very worthy of discussion. I think, art connects us in ways that other things can't. And I think in times like this, it's more critical than ever to look for opportunities to connect with our community.
It's a great answer. Thank you for being willing to contribute to that.
Great. Alderman Clee?
Thank you again, Madam Chairwoman. Similar to what I had commented to the previous speaker, is that sometimes the community, I don't want to use that word fluff because you just don't want to do that unless I'm talking about peanut butter. Anyways, the aspect of art is beauty, and as we said, brings the community together. It allows expression that we can't necessarily speak or even write about. But there's also the aspect of art when it comes to the money of that, of funding and so on. And first off, I want to say thank you for the resume writing that you did with the Nashua Soup Kitchen. That I'm sure was extraordinarily helpful to many people that way and so on. But you do have a business background, which is bringing some, as well as your art background, but that brings something, a different flavor to the commission. And I think that's a good aspect of it. One of the things that the commission is really good at is helping give these little groups a tiny leg up with some funding and so on. Recently, we just gotten the new grants, as if you've been going to the last few committees, you're aware of those. We're one of the few communities that actually got that very large grant, which is a great boon for us. But how would you engage with feedback? I see that one of the things that you put in here was that you led I think the way you put it was led implementation of a 360-degree feedback process, new performance and development planning process. I think feedback from the community is extremely important. And how would you try to work with the commission to try to get that feedback, maybe to engage people, to bring them into the arts and to understand how the arts actually help, both financially as well as spiritually, culturally, and so on. So do you have any ideas as to that?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and I love how you put that. I think, one good way to do it is simply bringing people together, in focus groups and discussion groups around just those issues. I think it also, when people have the chance to give feedback, they're more likely to be involved in future efforts. So that's a benefit as well. I have a lot of energy around just getting the word out to people as well. I know when I found out about how wonderful the arts were in Nashua, it made me feel completely different about living here. So I feel like, the more people we can connect with, the more people we can get information on the arts to, the better.
Thank you, and I like the way you worded that. Perfect, thank you very much.
Alderman Gouveia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, thank you for your dedication to the arts in our community. I agree with my colleague from Ward 3. I think your background brings more diversity with a business background, as well as just a love for the arts and a passion for the arts, as well as living in Ward 1. It's great to see. So I look forward to supporting your confirmation. I look forward to working with you in the future to see how we can advance the arts in Nashua. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I have one question. Thank you for your willingness to serve. You clearly have a strong resume for this. My question is around, the mayor pointed out that you have a business background, and I'm sort of interested in how you'll use this on the commission, because I work with a lot of artists and they don't always have this, they don't have that piece of it.
That's a good question. So, I'll mention again, I'm very new to the commission, so I think it depends on, what they need. I hope I bring some business thinking to how we promote things, to how we reach people, and how we get the word out to folks. But I think I'd be speaking too soon if I knew exactly how I'd use it. But I do appreciate the question.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're all set here. I think that is all your interviews, correct? Great. Applications to license hawkers, peddlers, iterant vendors license.
There is none.
Appointments by the mayor.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend confirmation of the new appointment to the Board of Registrars, William Grady, with a term to expire May 1st, 2025.
You can read all.
The following new alternate appointment to the Conservation Commission, Richard Widhue, with a term to expire May 1st, 2025. The following to reappoint and new appointment to Cultural Connections Committee, Deepa Mangalat, with a term to expire February 28th, 2025, and Claudia Decker, with a term to expire May 24th, 2025. And the following new appointments to the National Arts Commission, Joseph Oliferowitz, Deanna Hoying, and Lauren Spear-Savitt, all with terms to expire May 31st, 2025.
The motion is for final passage of the appointees in front of us. Great job with the names, Alderman Tebow.
Thank you.
Better than I used to do. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, that motion carries. Everyone who came in, thank you for your time. You'll be sworn in at the next Board of Aldermen meeting. Okay, we're moving on to unfinished business.
There's none.
New business resolutions.
None.
New business ordinances.
I'd like to make a motion to establish Greeley Park Advisory Committee as O-22-015.
So we have before us O-15, establishing a Greeley Park Advisory Committee, and I imagine your motion is to recommend final passage?
Correct.
Awesome, great. Okay, and just note for the record that Alderman O'Brien has joined us in the chamber. Okay, I'm going to open this up for discussion. I think it's your piece of legislation, Alderman Clee. You're not me. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a couple here, so. Thank you so much for everybody taking the time to look at that. I think when Mr. Murphy spoke, he spoke quite eloquently about Greeley Park. Greeley Park is a beautiful place that we hold art events. We hold, there were times where we had Shakespeare in the park, and we have the, I know I'm going to say it wrong, but we have the ferry event at Greeley Park. There's a lot that goes on at Greeley Park, and I think that it's time to kind of give it its own voice. We've done that with Mine Falls. I think the mayor could probably speak to this as well. So after I speak, if he could have a moment as well. The issue is that the Stone House, we drive by, we see, it looks beautiful. Any given weekend, you can see people doing prom pictures there. You can see wedding pictures being taken there. I think it is probably one of the most, not necessarily the most, but one of the most photographed areas within the city. There is so much more potential there. I know I've spoken to people about wanting to put in more paths and so on down at the I think that's considered the eastern end of the park. There are some paths in there already, but to kind of give it the attention it needs. It doesn't necessarily mean that we'd be able to fund any of these things, but I think it would give a voice to that park. It's one of our larger parks in the city. We've heard before on different things that have gone on. TripAdvisor speaks to Greeley Park and all that it has to offer. And the truth is that this is, at this point, would be no cost to the city, with possibly staffing that would have to be part of this commission and so on. So I think it's a no cost, but a voice to a beautiful park. And yes, it is in my ward, so I am slightly prejudiced about it. But if the mayor could speak as well, I'd appreciate it.
Mayor Donchis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, our two premier parks in Nashua are, of course, Greeley and Mine Falls Park. We've had an advisory commission for Mine Falls for a long time, and they have definitely strengthened the park. Not only do they meet with the parks director to talk about the direction of the park, but they also manage cleanup efforts, periodic volunteer efforts to make improvements at the park and clean things up. And they discuss problems and direction, problems to be corrected and future direction of the park. So the legislation here is modeled exactly after Mine Falls. It's really the same language, with the exception of Mine Falls has a member of the Nashua River Watershed Association because it abuts the Nashua River. This legislation instead designates the Lower Merrimack River Advisory Council, because the park abuts the Merrimack River. Certainly these, as Alderwoman Clee said, an advisory committee can help advocate, point out problems. Recently there have been illegal fires, people starting campfires where they're not supposed to. needles, other things like that. Those things need to be addressed. Also, as Alderwoman Klee mentioned, in terms of the future of the park, there is this whole area down by the river, between the soccer fields and the river, which, really is underutilized, and people should begin thinking about if it should remain as it is, or if there should be more trails. I mean, there's the potential for really beautiful vistas over the Merrimack River, and because it abuts the Merrimack River. So like the Advisory Commission for Mine Falls, this can help strengthen our other major national park.
Okay, all set. Alderman Lopez.
I think to Alderman Klee as a sponsor or to the mayor, I was confused at the specific language prohibiting anybody from being in Parks and Recreation as being a member on the committee. I could understand being a citizen representative and having like a dual role where you don't want to have a voting role that might represent, your boss, but not having a liaison or an identified position with a role there from Parks and Recreation. I understand this committee to be important because Nashua has done a great job with Greeley Park over the years. And I think a huge part of that is Parks and Recreation. So I was wondering what the thought process there was.
Well, I think that language tracks the Mine Falls. And the Parks Director definitely meets with and functions along with the Mine Falls Advisory Committee, but is not actually a member of the committee. So in order to mirror what we've done at Mine Falls, which again, I believe has been very successful, I think that language just was carried forward.
Alderman Klee,
I
did
mean,
you want to respond?
Is it essential?
Alderman
Is
Klee
it
wanted to
essential? I would say no, but it does mirror what we see at Mine Falls.
Right, and just to follow up, I would imagine that the committee will be more successful with coordination with Parks and Rec, and I can kind of see the logic of not having an advisory committee advise itself, like have that department. So I guess I understand better now. I was just confused because it looked like there wasn't a role for them, and I wanted to see that there would be.
Alderman Klee.
Thank you. And to what the mayor had to say, I agree. I think it's kind of following that type of advice that we have from the Mine Falls Commission. I think to say that no member would do that, meaning that there'd be no voting member and so on. I think having a liaison of a non-voting member. So for instance, I am on the Arts Commission as a non-voting member, just as a kind of give guidance and to bring it back forward to here. But I think we tend to get, if we start putting a board member on or even a Parks and Rec, we may dissuade them from some of the ideas that they may have. So I think it's good not to have them as a member, but it would not be a bad point to put them as a advisory type of, advisory on the advisory. I know it kind of sounds silly, but just to help guide them if they kind of come up with these huge ideas. But I think it's working with the Mine Falls Commission, and I think we should kind of keep it within that, and so it doesn't become too much.
I mean, I assume the rationale is because this is an advisory commission advising the Board of Aldermen and the Parks Department, that, a crossover doesn't make sense. Now, is that language essential? No, but it is in the Mine Falls in the Mine Falls ordinance, so we just mirrored it, as I said.
All set, Alderman Lopez?
Yeah, I'm surprised that it's in the Mine Falls language. I never noticed that. I'm just trying to figure out scenarios where I feel like the city department is an essential partner to anything. They would have the information needed and probably be valuable for supporting it. And then even, like, I'm not exactly sure where our line ends and the Board of Public Works begins. So I guess I was just a little confused.
So I have thoughts, but I didn't know if anyone else from the committee wants to speak. Oh, I didn't see your hand.
That's okay. Just as an aside, if this committee saw fit to put a liaison on that, I personally, I know this is now in your hands, so I don't have a voice on it, but I personally would not have an issue with it. I just wouldn't want them to be a voting member, because then it looks like it's too city heavy. And I would prefer this to be kind of a citizen type of active group. I do agree with what Alderman Lopez said, is that it's good to have them there maybe as a liaison to give advice, and it may hold more weight when it comes forward to either Public Works, because this will probably have a Public Works aspect of it, much like Mine Falls does, or the Board of Aldermen, but I would not want to see a voting member from the board or from Public Works.
Thank you, Alderman Clee. Alderman Gouveia, and then Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would agree. I think a non-voting liaison would probably be good. I know I sit on the airport authority and I'm a non-voting member, and I think it's good to see from a different perspective when you don't have to make the immediate decision. You're able to kind of look at it from a different angle. So I think the whole idea itself is a great idea. I think anytime we can get citizens together who are passionate about saving a small part, or not saving, but maintaining a certain part of our city is a great idea, and finding people who are passionate about saving Greeley Park and making sure it looks great, I think it's a very good idea.
Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Yeah, I didn't know how to vote coming in on this one. I wanted to hear I thought I was going to get some different sides on it, but hearing that gentleman speak earlier, I thought it really made sense, especially hearing about Mines Falls and how it's, helped the Mines Falls area, and I think it's a good idea, and I think, to Alderman Gouveia's point, citizens want to speak and want to give their input. It doesn't cost anything, so why not, right? And so I think I am going to support it. Thank you.
Okay. I'll start by saying that I absolutely think we have incredible parks in Nashua, and I use them all the time with my children, by myself. Greeley is especially a beautiful park that we're so lucky to have. My concern with the piece of legislation is that it's very focused on one park, which we already have Mine Falls, but does it make sense to just make a park advisory committee and then have people from different wards or different parks kind of be those appointees, so we don't end up with a Roby Park advisory committee and a Greeley Park and a Mine Falls Park? Just asking to both sponsors of this legislation what they think of that. Alderman Clee.
Thank you. On the surface, I think that sounds like a good idea, but when I kind of delve into it, it's kind of similar to when we talked about the trust fund for Court Street. When we start putting everything in together, we kind of dilute it. We have a building trust fund, but we knew that the Court Street was special and needed to be special. Does Roby Park need an advisory committee? I would support that as well. Do you want to do a park advisory committee of just, the smaller parks? I don't have a problem with that. I think Greeley kind of stands on its own. It's one of our larger parks. I think even though Park and Recs is right there in Greeley Park, I think sometimes it doesn't get the attention that it needs. And I know people say, oh, that's up in the north end, it gets lots of attention. But the truth is, we have a stage and a shell that has never been completed. It needs more attention to that. I think this advisory committee could actually look at all the aspects of it. How can we take advantage of it? One of the things is we've changed a lot of the baseball fields that are there, and as the mayor referred to it, as the soccer fields. If you talk to many people about the soccer fields at Greeley Park, they'll look at you like, what soccer fields? They don't even realize that many of those have been turned into soccer fields and so on. It has the pickleball court and so on. So I think the advisory committee could help to navigate how we can use the park better. And it's a larger park. It's not one of the smaller parks that we have within the city. I know when we talked about, I won't go into the details of the Barker and Bartlett Street issue, but it came and they said, well, Ward 3 has all these parks. Well, yes and no. When you take the park as being the fireman memorial is considered a park in Ward 3, we don't have a lot of picnickers out that way. So a park advisory would take all of those things into it. I think Greeley is very unique in its way. And I would support a advisory committee for Roby Park, especially if the aldermen came forward and explained why they felt, especially now that we've got disc golf and everything, maybe we do need one. But I don't think it should preclude us having one for Greeley. We've shown the benefit of a very specific park, advisory committee for a very specific park when we looked at Mine Falls. And yes, Mine Falls is much larger than Greeley, but it's different. And I think that because of the diversity of all these little parks, we can't lump them in together. It's this, in my opinion, it's the same thing as having a building trust fund versus a Court Street trust fund. So, thank you.
I would say, if you kind of spend some time with the people who are on the Mine Falls Advisory Committee, I mean, they are very, I mean, I'm sure they value Greeley Park, but they are very passionate about that park. And they're willing to go there on the weekends and work in the park and organize, and they're constantly there and they pay a lot of attention to it. Therefore, I mean, I think that's what we want to duplicate. We want to find people who are passionate about Greeley Park specifically, and they'll spend time on that particular park. And if we wanted to do it for, I mean, I guess the number 3 park in the city is Roby. I mean, we could do it there as well, but certainly 1 and 2, and probably, or tied for first, are Mine Falls and Greeley.
Alderman Clemmons.
Yeah, what I would hate to see, kind of to Alderman Kelly's point, is us going down the road of listing out all the parks and then creating 100 advisory committees for each one. Exactly. But that being said, Greeley Park is not the largest park, but certainly probably the most well-known park in Nashua. The Mines Falls Park Advisory Committee does a fantastic job, and that park is such a large area that it needs help from a committee as the mayor said, dedicated volunteers that know the ins and outs, know the secret places, know what's going on, and can kind of bring different issues to the forefront and basically reach out to the community for people who do care, who are like-minded and are willing to work and put in the effort and things like that. I think Greeley Park could use the same sort of effort and the same sort of community outreach, and I think this is a great way to do that. I think when it comes to these advisory committees, you have to look at the area that you're talking about and whether or not it's large enough to support such a committee, and whether or not it's diverse enough to have a committee that can meet every month and talk about a number of different issues that run the gamut of, well, there's performances at the stage here, and there's E. coli in the river over here, and we have a boat launch over here, and on this side there's a development that's happening and people want to talk about that. And it's so multifaceted that you need a group like that, versus a smaller park, maybe just has a baseball park in it, or it has one thing, whatever, and it probably doesn't need the attention, and it probably has people that already are dedicated to it on their own. Or it's easier to oversee from the Parks Department point of view. They don't need the help of an advisory committee for a smaller park like that. So I agree with you. I think we do need to be cautious about going down the road of having an advisory committee for every single park in Nashua, but I think, on the other hand, I think that this one is going to be a good thing for Greeley Park. And I think if we can get people together who are passionate about it, know the ins and outs, know what the neighbors are saying, know what the visitors are saying, and things like that, I think we'll be doing a good thing for our community.
Thank you. Okay. I have a couple of other questions and thoughts. One of the things that we've come up against recently with Roby Park, and other, ideas that people come up with, which are great, is also the conservation of wetlands and things in these. So had you considered, I don't think I saw it, having someone from the Conservation Commission, or how are we interfacing with the Conservation Commission when we're making changes with the parks?
Well, as with Mine Falls, a member of the Conservation Commission is a designated member
Yes.
Is it a
of
member? I just
of
missed
the
it.
Greeley Park Advisory Committee. So the language is 2 members will be appointed
Right.
for the length of their tenure on the Conservation Commission. That's the same with Mine Falls. And Lower Merrimack River Local Advisory Committee. So the Lower Merrimack organization, as, again, as at Mine Falls, that's the Nashua River Watershed Association. But a member of the Conservation Commission would be on the.
Great, thank you. Alderman Clee?
And it does add to the completion of their tenure. So once they're appointed to their, if they were to leave the commission, someone else would have to go on there. But it's not like they have to keep being appointed. So as long as their tenure is active, they would be on it. So we should not lose anybody from the commission. And I agree with you. That was actually one of the first things that I looked for, was to make sure that, because we do have hidden wetlands within the park, and so on. So, but thank you for bringing that forward.
Thank you for the answer. So I think Alderman Clemens brings up good points. I think Greeley is a unique park. I still have concerns about equity of voice, and that the 2 downtown parks are going to have lots of voices. And I know you specifically, Alderwoman Clee, help clean up the tot lots, etc. So I'll level with you. I will support this, but I think we need a park advisory for these smaller parks that really don't get the attention that they need either. Alderman Clee.
Thank you. I 100% agree with you. I think our smaller parks, such as the tot lots, do kind of get lost within the neighborhoods. I think it would also help park advisory, and I know this is kind of going off subject, but I think a park advisory committee would be very good to ensure that we did have parks in every one of our wards, because right now I don't think we do. So I think it would kind of help to bring that conversation forward. I would not want to see a park advisory per park, because as I pointed out, the fireman's memorial is considered a park in the city, and we do not want to have
I think there might be 38 parks.
Yeah.
We've got quite a few parks, and some of them are very small. I mean, even Foster Square is considered a park. And truthfully, other than I call it the poop land, it really is not a park per se that people would go to. I think a park advisory commission, or a committee, or however you want to do it, in addition to something like that, would kind of bring the voice to the parks. I don't think our citizens know how much we have here in Nashua. We kind of hide them away. TripAdvisory referred to Greeley Park as the gem of Nashua, and why I take a lot of pride in that, we have a lot of gems in Nashua. I have to say they probably haven't been to Mine Falls, if they say that, or maybe they haven't been to Roby Park, or even any of the tot lots. People that live in those areas are very proud of their little parks. So I do agree with you as far as a general, and maybe putting one of the members of each of these other advisory, the Greely and so on that park advisory would help.
So, June Lemon, when she wrote for the Telegraph, did a series on which she visited every single park in Nashua and wrote an article about it.
I want to find those.
Yeah, it was quite good.
It was.
That's where I think I get the idea of 38, but we should ask Ms. Lemon, and she would be able to tell us the exact number.
We might have more by now, hopefully.
Maybe she wants to share.
Okay. I will stop beating the same drum here. I think that we've talked through these points, and I think a park advisory will be something I'm going to put in very soon. So hopefully you and I can work on that. And I think approaching it as these are the 2 biggest parks, the rest of the parks can go under park advisory, and having liaisons sounds like a good approach. But we can talk through it. Okay.
Madam Chair?
Oh.
If I can.
Alderman Gouveia.
Thank you. Before we take the vote, could I please just clarify, we haven't added in language for a non-voting liaison. Would that be something we would want to go forward with?
Oh, you wanted to add that.
May I just make a suggestion that there be a liaison from both Public Works and the Board of Aldermen as non-voting? If you just wanted to do it from Public Works, I would be happy with that as well. But I think, as Alderman Gouveia had mentioned, one of the aspects of having somebody from the Board of Aldermen there is that when it comes forward, we can be the voice for that, whether we voted or not. I always think it's good to, so that we can enlighten each other as to it.
So to clarify, you're saying you would like, and because someone on the committee is going to have to make the
Right,
motion,
exactly.
a non-voting member from
The Board of Aldermen as well as,
Board of
any,
Public
as,
Works?
as a designee from the Public Works and Parks and Rec. Let them make the decision as to who sits on it. I think much like the planning board.
Okay. Alderman Dowd?
Yeah, I would just caution making a liaison from the Board of Public Works without asking them whether they want to have a liaison. And they're going to be here tomorrow night, so you can ask them that question and make any motions at the full Board of Aldermen meeting.
Do you want to hold to me? Okay, wow, there's lots of hands up. Alderman Clemens?
Yeah, I would support adding one from the Board of Aldermen. I think we should let the Board of Public Works decide if they want to engage with this committee after it's established to have a liaison. They can always establish that on their own, and just have somebody, you know, that works with the committee, and the committee can decide if they want to do that, if that's the case. And that's the approach I would take.
Okay. Alderman Lopez?
Yeah, so I had the same thought when we were talking earlier, and it was expressed that it wouldn't be opposed to. I was kind of like, oh, well, I can do it at any point. I'm an alderman. Like, I can always put a new amendment in. So I kind of wanted to check and see with Parks and Rec how they felt, because they may feel like putting a staff member there who doesn't get a vote. They'd rather that be optional rather than a role that looks like it's empty. And I was a little hesitant about actually appointing or adding a member of the Board of Aldermen too, without even checking with the president, because we have a lot of committees to liaise with, so I'm not exactly sure what the obligations of that would look like. So I think at least checking with Parks and Rec prior to the full board meeting would be a good idea.
Mayor Donchis, do we have a liaison to the Mine Falls Pike Advisory from the Board of Aldermen?
Yes.
We do.
I'm not sure.
I think you're right.
We do.
We do,
We do.
okay.
Yeah, I don't know who it is, though. Who is it?
We do have one because I wanted to put in for it, but I didn't get it.
It's not me. Apparently it's nobody else.
I'm looking it up right now.
We'll know the answer in a moment.
Okay, so the answer is yes.
Yes, okay. Alderman Gouveia?
Yes, I would have to agree. I don't want to speak for another board before consulting with them or kind of tying them to an obligation of adding a liaison. So I'd like to move to amend the ordinance, adding in a non-voting liaison from the Board of Aldermen.
Okay, the motion is to amend. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
We need to vote on the recommendation of final passage. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great.
Thank
Do
you.
I need you for anything else? Housing trust? Okay.
Madam
We've
President?
got,
You can, just don't leave.
We've got
I have questions for you.
Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Cummings here.
Okay.
Madam President, may I
Quickly.
think I need to take back what I said. I'm looking at the membership of the Mine Falls Advisory Commission, and I do not see a member from the Board of Aldermen.
I just pulled up all of our liaisonships and it's not on.
We're not
Yeah,
one.
we're not on there. No, so we are
We
we are
voted
not
on
on
it. We can always talk about it tomorrow and change it tomorrow.
There was actually some
Actually, it won't
surprise
be
a couple
tomorrow. It'll be
times
the
when I
next
showed
Board of
up at the
Aldermen.
meeting, so
Yeah.
Yeah,
didn't think
I
it would
think
be-
aldermen have shown up at the meeting, but it's, yeah,
Well, we can address it when it comes to the full board.
thank you.
Alderman Clemens, go
Just
ahead.
briefly on that, I think we made the right decision. My own opinion, I think we made the right decision tonight, and if anything, I think we need to add one to the Mine Falls.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's mine.
Okay, great. We're going to move on.
All right, I want to make a motion for final passage of O-22-016, clarifying animal prohibitions in parks.
And this is yours, Alderman Cleese, so I'll let you speak to it first.
I know there was a lot of controversy about this on social media, people saying, you're not going to allow my dogs in parks, and it has absolutely nothing to do with, it's just taking the current signage and just saying pet. There are places that don't allow dogs or horses, but you could take your alligator, your chicken, your whatever you want there, but you can't bring a dog or a horse into certain parks. All this does is clarify those particular parks to change it, and this was brought forward through the EDPAC, the Animal and Dog Park Advisory Commission, and I believe it was the Officer Lengus, who our animal control officer, our ACO, who asked to have this clarification. And the reason for is, you know, we often say is that we bring forward needs, and he had a need. He had someone who had actually brought something that was not a dog and a horse. Truthfully, it is escaping my brain, but we had a very long conversation about it. I cannot tell you what it was. I think it was a reptile of some sort. So, and I have, to be honest with you, I've known even at Greeley Park where dogs will always be allowed, but there was someone who was sunning their boa constrictor not that long ago. So, yeah. So this will not affect Greeley Park. Greeley Park will still stay boa constrictor friendly, but I'm not advertising that. But there are some smaller parks where dogs and horses are not allowed for various reasons. Probably the poo issue, especially of a horse and of a dog. But he just wanted to clarify it. The cost to this, based on the analysis, is about $5,000, and that's for the changing of signs.
Of the signs, yeah.
But there's no other cost to that. And then once the signs are changed, it's just the average cost of changing signs and so on throughout the city. One of the things is we have a lot of conflicting signs in the city where it says, there's a sign there that says, no dogs allowed here. Pennachuck is one of those places. So on the field, there's a sign that says no dogs allowed. That's very clear, but within a foot of that sign, it says, please pick up after your dog. So which is it? Is my dog not allowed in there, or do I have to pick up its poo? So this is going to fix those signs, kind of clear up those signs, and it won't say dogs, it'll say no pets. And that's kind of some of the things that be going on.
Ooh, there's a lot of people who want to talk on this. Alderman Clemens
You
and
should have
Alderman
seen
Lopez.
So, yeah,
I'm not familiar with that site.
when I was younger, when I was in high school, I worked at CVS in downtown Nashua. And when you walked in, it said, you know, no shirt, no shoes, no service, and it also said no pets. And one time I was standing by the door and a guy walks in, he's got no shirt on, he's got no shoes, and he's got a giant boa constrictor wrapped around him. I just looked at him and I said, sorry, man. I said, you're violating all three. I said, you gotta go. And so, you know, so it's funny because the point is, right, we're updating the ordinance so it says pets. I think back to my time at CVS, and clearly, you know, it said pets, and it makes sense because you want to be clear with people about what the expectation is, and in different places. And you also want to give the park superintendent the latitude to be able to, you know, clarify what is and isn't allowed in certain areas. And I think this certainly does that. I don't think it changes anything at all as to what we are currently doing, except to say that, you know, maybe updating some of that where, well, unfortunately, you can't bring your boa constrictor, you can't do this in a certain place because you really shouldn't have been able to do that all along. And that's sort of the intent of the ordinance, and I certainly support it.
Okay, Alderman Lopez?
I think it's also a good improvement to change it to pets. Only reason I know this is because when I was in college, my glasses were even worse than they are now. And so I was not a fan of the possibility presented to me of getting a seeing eye dog. And they legit tried to convince me I wanted a seeing eye mini pony. And I was like, that's not better. But if you have legislation which explicitly says you can't have a horse or a dog versus a pet, that doesn't, like, if you say it's a pet, then service animals aren't excluded. So I think that's a better update than just specifically saying random thing can't be.
Okay, Alderman Gavea? You didn't have your hand up?
No,
Okay,
I'll
Alderman
speak,
Dow.
but yeah, it was first.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd like us to clarify that very quickly because we're replacing the fence and all the signs at Pennachuck, and I'd hate to replace them
Great.
twice, so.
Yep, fair.
Let's get the wording down, because those two signs are coming down.
Yes.
Yeah, so just one quick point from me, if I can, from you to Alderman Quinn.
Yep.
So just so I'm clear, I think I have it right. So this would put up signs, or it would make it so it would tell you where you can't have a dog, correct? Instead of where you can? Okay, perfect, thank you.
Alderman, oh, go ahead, Alderman.
To that point, there was conversation as to, do we start posting signs so your pet is allowed here and so on. And I think that was going to create confusion because most people see signs that prohibit, not allow. So that's one of the things they did. And if I may just add one more thing, one of the other controversies on social media was pets versus farm animals. And someone said, can I bring my cow there? Technically speaking, probably, but why? But there will be someone that will push that envelope. I think there is state, and perhaps Alderman O'Brien may know, I think there's state legislation because we were a farming community that allows farm animals, very specific farm animals, when they're like, I don't necessarily mean leash, but have to be that can be allowed onto certain parks. And I don't really want to go down that way, but I want to address it because it was brought up and I sometimes just shake my head and it's like, I'm not even typing anymore. It's not worth it. But I think Alderman Como.
I'm going to bring my leash chicken.
I know you will.
All right, it's gonna
They're
happen.
supposed to be on a leash, remember?
Right? No free range. I think Alderman Como was next.
I, on the face of this, have no general problem with this legislation. I did have a couple of nitpicky questions, if I could ask through you to the author of the legislation. I just was curious, since we just had this conversation about pets and what's a pet, if it would make more sense to just say animals. When I saw this on the agenda, I looked up the definition of pet and it says a tamed animal, and I could just imagine somebody with a python saying, this isn't a pet because it doesn't,
I had similar concerns.
So I didn't know if it would make more sense to just make it animals. And then I would like to know if it would be prudent to maybe add some language excluding, officially licensed service animals from this. I know that we kind of assume that that's the case and we have, the ADA and everything, but maybe just putting it on paper that's saying it doesn't apply to that would be prudent. And then the third and last thing I had was I wanted confirmation because the language in the existing ordinance does say, they're prohibited except where allowed, and this would change it to allowed except where prohibited. Does that mean we'd have to re-sign all of the parks that already have existing signage? I like the idea of, they're prohibited everywhere. I know there's a lot of baseball fields that I use, baseball and softball fields, that there's no signage, but we know that you can't bring dogs onto a baseball field for the poo reason. So I'd hate to think that we have to go around to every baseball and softball field and add signage when right now the existing ordinance already prohibits it except, in the designated places where we do allow it. So I wonder if that change is also necessary.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you. I really appreciate you bringing each of those topics up. First, to address the thing about the animals, and let me write ballpark here so I can remember to go back to it. The thing about animals, and we did talk about that. We had a very lengthy conversation about it. The problem with animals is then you get people who are going to stand there and go, the squirrel's there, the fox is there. So it became quite hard to define, you can't bring your animal in there, or you can't do that when there are animals in general running around in there. That's why they opted for pet. And you're right. People can say, well, my boa constrictor isn't tamed and therefore it's not really a pet. But I think the looser definition, maybe not the Webster definition, but it's, a domesticated animal that's living within your home and so on and so forth, versus even a farm animal. I mean, I grew up where, my great-grandmother had a pet cow, and that cow met you at the bottom of the driveway and walked up with you. So, I still would not expect her to have brought her cow here, but, it was her pet. To the ballpark comment, they are prohibited on the field while play is happening. But because the ballparks aren't all encased in fencing, such as at Greeley Park, we can't stop people from walking their dogs across the ballpark. So the only time, and I had the same issue with the tot lots. Not all the tot lots are dog prohibited or pet prohibited. Only the ones that were fenced in could we put something to that. Because it's very difficult to say to a person who has their dog, you can't go from here to here. You're gonna have to find a whole nother road to go through that. So I think the city has put in that, at least it was explained to me. I've not gone and looked at the ordinance, so I don't want to quote anything, but the way it was explained to me was that we can't stop someone from walking their dog, but during play and so on, they could cite someone, they could stop them from doing that. It's kind of one of those kind of gray areas, and I'm not really sure if we actually have put that into the ordinance, so I don't want to say that I know that for a fact, but when I did speak to Parks and Recs about the tot lot and about ballparks, that was kind of the explanation that was given to me. Did I hit all your points?
For the most part, there are a lot of fenced-in ballparks that are not like the ones at Greeley that
Right.
I think we don't want dogs on even when there's not play. Because a lot of people don't clean them up, and then when I go to my softball games, we have to walk the outfield before the games to de-poop them, which is no fun.
May I comment, Madam Chairman?
Alderman Clegg.
And I agree with you, Alderman Como. I think anything that's fenced in, we should be putting up signs, and I don't care how many of the parks that we have, we should be putting up signs that say that they are not allowed within a fenced-in park. And the reason for that is because what happens too often is, much like what happens in the tot lot, is people that live in apartments and want to let their dogs run, but they don't necessarily belong to a dog park. Hopefully at the dog park we're doing will give them some space. They want to let the dog, it's a nice, safe environment within a gated community, and we have that with our soccer fields and so on. So I think prohibiting something like that, we've done it with our cemeteries, we've done it now with the fenced-in tot lots. I think it would be a good idea to have that kind of signage for the fenced-in, any kind of fenced-in athletic field.
Alderman Como, did you have a follow-up?
So I
Sorry.
just wanted to be clear, so if we do pass this as written, are those ball fields going to be re-signed? Is that what the administrative costs associated with the legislation are for?
I believe it is, and if I'm wrong, I will correct that before the next Board of Aldermen.
Thank you.
Alderman Dowd.
And I'm going to bring up Alderman Clement's favorite topic when you talk ordinance. I didn't see if there was a specific fine if you violate these signs, number one. If it's not an ordinance, you can be fined up to $1,000, as Alderman Clements well knows, because we've been down that road before. And the other thing is, who enforces it?
Alderman Clegg.
Thank you. Both very good questions. The enforcement usually falls within the animal control officer. Of course, he's only there, right, we have one, and he's there Monday through Thursday, I think, and one weekend he now works. He has limited hours, but it's also enforced by our police department. And Parks and Rec will shoo people out and so on. Would they do fines? We have fines for being off leash. We have fines for pooping and not picking it up. There are dollar amounts that are put to that, and this board actually did, I think it was the $25 fine is what we did put in ordinance not that long ago, I think within the past year we have, and that's part of what the Animal Dog Park Advisory did. So there may not be a fine for violating bringing your dog in, but yes, there are fines for not having your dog on a leash and not picking up after it. I don't know. One of the things I can tell you that when I speak to our animal control officer is he does not like giving out tickets for this. He will for repeat offenders, but he likes to do, much like our police department does, let's educate before we do fining, before we do arrests, before we do anything like this. So it doesn't always, I'm not here. It doesn't always, it doesn't always mean anything to put up a sign and people are just going to ignore it. There are those that are going to ignore it, and then there are those people that will be aware. I'll be honest with you. I always brought my dogs, especially during the winter time, walking through the city cemeteries. They're perfect. They're paved. People abused it, and now we have it posted in our cemeteries that you cannot bring your dog in that. It broke my heart because it was a nice, safe place to be able to walk my dog, but because people abused it and so on. I would never bring my dog in there. Will somebody else do it? Probably. You know, I can't fix the world, but I think we can at least make it a little bit better by putting something like this in it. So thank you for your questions.
One more follow-up, Alderman Camille?
Sorry, it's my own fault for asking so many questions the first time, and I appreciate your answers, but I think you missed the question I had about the service animals. What are your opinions on adding language to exempt service animals?
Alderman Clay.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you for the question, and I apologize for it, because it did hit my head. We did talk about that, and there is basically the ADA that says service animals can go almost anywhere. I think even into kitchens and so on. I think when we start putting in verbiage like that, where it already exists, what happens is if that law changed, for instance, say they said, okay, except in this thing, we'd have to remember to go and find it and make the exception here. Where it already exists, I don't know if we want to duplicate it. I think it creates confusion with legislation. And I can tell you that from even here in the city, one of the things that the animal control officer, the reason why you see so many of these type of legislation is he's been going through and saying, okay, well, this one's contradicting this one and so on. So the more places you put things, the more things you have to remember to correct. So while it already exists, I do agree with you, it would help. What we do oftentimes, you don't have samples of the signs here, but on the signage, we always put exception within ADA compliance, and they cite those type of RSAs and so on. So I don't think it needs to be in the legislation, but I think it is a good point to bring up, at least for conversation for the community to hear.
I'm glad to hear that the conversation happened during the writing of the legislation, so thank you.
And may I just kind of compliment the AdPAC committee. I know Alderman Lopez was also, he was on it as the liaison, and now he's the alternate liaison. They are a hardworking group of people that constantly push the boundary of, but the what if. My only claim to fame there is I seem to talk about poo all the time. It seems to be my favorite subject.
All right. Did I ever get to you, Alderman Dowd, or did we go back and forth with Alderman Como?
No, you got to me, but if I were a member of this committee, I'd move the question.
The motion on the table is to recommend final passage. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Next.
Sure. I'd like to make a motion for final passage of O-22-017, establishing a housing trust fund committee.
The motion is to recommend final passage of O-22-017.
And that is not mine.
That is not yours.
Please, guys.
I don't think you're going to quiet well.
No.
Great.
Heard that.
We have Director Cummings and Director Sullivan joining us in the horseshoe. I think they would like to. Oh, are you good? Want to start out by giving us some background on this piece of legislation, please?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, Matt Sullivan, Community Development Division Director. I do just want to say, from cows to boa constrictors to the arts, you've had quite some range this evening.
I'm just saying.
Just want to add some variety to that, but in all seriousness, thank you for having us this evening. My name is Matt Sullivan, Community Development Division Director, and I'm here this evening to speak briefly to O-22-17, which is a piece of legislation to specifically establish a housing trust fund committee for the city of Nashua, and it's only to establish the committee, and I'll get into a little bit more about that in just a few minutes here. But first, by way of background for the newer members of the board, the Housing Trust Fund was initially reestablished in 2021 as part of a piece of legislation and seed funded with $30,000. That after an initial establishment decades before under Mayor Donchis' prior terms with the city of Nashua. This is an expendable trust fund by nature, and in fact, the mayor is indicated as the agent to expend under the trust fund. And the intent of the fund was broad in nature, but generally intended to support implementation activities of a few different planning efforts that have been done by the city, including the 2020 housing study, the Imagine Nashua master plan, and subsequent inclusionary zoning work that's been done by the city amongst the execution of other plans as well. Generally, those activities were bounded by the fact that they might include efforts to support low and moderate income housing efforts, to actually support first-time home buyer programs, to support the preservation of affordable housing units generally, amongst a variety of other activities. But I want to again reinforce this evening that the actual activities of the Housing Trust Fund are not a piece of this legislation. They'll subsequently be decided under the deliberation of this committee. And so we won't get into specifics of what the programs will look like this evening. From a funding perspective, the trust was set up under an initial appropriation of $30,000. That was actually the compounded appropriation of a $10,000 payment that's made annually by Clock Tower Place to the city of Nashua under a 1998 agreement. And again, it's a $10,000 contribution that will continue into the future. But in addition to that, the intent at that time and the contemplation at that time was that the fund would continue to be replenished via payments from the inclusionary zoning ordinance and the payments in lieu that happen for units within that, as well as the contemplated allocation to the fund that we're talking about more generally, that being the ARPA dollars and a range of around $10 million potentially being contributed to that fund, which we're very excited about and I know will result in further conversation with the board moving forward. But the first step is really the creation of this committee, and this committee is intended to specifically provide recommendations to the mayor in his role as agent to expend in how the program should be administered, what specific projects might be undertaken under the purview of the fund, and really to create the guidelines and provide public outreach and education about how the fund is being used, while also providing general support to housing initiatives currently going on in the city. In addition to making recommendations on how the fund will be used, as I mentioned before, the three sort of critical activities that the committee would undertake in its infancy would be creating the trust fund guidelines, creating the scoring criteria that some members of the public raised at the initial public comment session, and setting eligibility parameters for how investments would be made at certain income levels or as part of certain projects that may have unique characteristics as well. The committee will support a variety of other housing initiatives, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, and also make recommendations to the Board of Aldermen in the context of inclusionary zoning and other zoning policies that may need to be modified in the future. And so while this is dedicated to the Housing Trust Fund, we do look at this very much so as a group of housing subject matter experts that will advise the mayor and board more generally, including staff as well. Specifically within the legislation that's before you this evening, the committee is constituted with 7 members, and I'll just quickly review what those are for the benefit of the public and certainly members of the committee. One is a representative of the Board of Aldermen, and this is for a 2-year term, and I point that out because the remainder of the folks included here are really intended to be a 3-year term. The second is a representative or member of a low-income community, and we'll get into specifics of what that is as we go into setting the guidelines for the actual program. The third is a licensed New Hampshire attorney, as we do expect there'll be some legal matters that will need support in the committee's regular business. And that also leads to the fourth member, which is a finance professional who has specific experience related to housing lending and the programs associated with housing lending. The fifth is a representative of the housing advocacy community. That's not intended to be a specific organization. This would be, again, an appointment at the pleasure of the mayor from the community more generally. We have a few folks in the room this evening that have been tremendously supportive of both this legislation and precedent housing legislation. We look to those folks to provide some expertise and some assistance to the work of this committee. And then finally, a bit unusual but not, and I'll explain why in just a second, we are suggesting that 2 staff members actually serve as voting members of the committee, specifically because of the technical nature of this committee's work. And we have suggested through this legislation that the city's economic development director and myself, the community development division director, or our successors, whoever those might be, or designees, would serve as members 6 and 7 on the proposed committee structure. As I mentioned before, the terms of these members would be 3 years, with the exception of the aldermanic representative, which would be a 2-year term. In the initiation of the committee's work, if formed, these would be staggered such that we don't have a wholesale change happening in a few years, and so we'd start with a staggered set of terms. As I mentioned just a moment ago, these appointments would be made by the mayor, so they would not be returning to the Board of Aldermen for confirmation. They'd be appointments by the mayor specifically to the committee. And then finally, I wanted to point out something, it's a bit awkward, but I want to explain it, and it is that within the legislation, the Community Development Division Director is proposed to be the chair of the committee. What was contemplated there, as is contemplated in our TIF committee and in our revolving loan fund committee, is that the chair would serve as really a passive and facilitating chair only, really being less of an active member of the community in the conversations that happen at the committee level, and even some of the votes that happen at the committee level. And so the intent is to provide that administrative support and facilitation to the committee in its work, and therefore we recommended a staff person serve as the chair, with the Economic Development Director serving as the vice chair in that person's absence. Again, I expect that there may be questions from the committee this evening about the specific activities that are contemplated within the Housing Trust Fund as it's been set up. We're excited about those too, but I'm not sure that I'm going to be prepared to answer any questions, because it's really going to be the work of this committee that will lay the foundation and groundwork for what decisions might be made in the future. That said, I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. I expect I may have missed something that Director Cummings may want to comment on, or perhaps not, but thank you for your consideration this evening.
Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So you said it would not come back to the Board of Aldermen for us to confirm appointments by the mayor at all?
No, they would.
Oh, they would still?
That's correct. I misspoke. I apologize for that. These would be mayoral appointments.
Right, okay. But we would confirm them.
Correct.
Okay.
Alderman
So, I mean, I look at this and I think this is a great idea, and I'm all for the committee. I think we have a housing problem here in Nashua. I'm afraid in a couple of years the bubble is going to burst, because I hear it in South Nashua. I hear that, rent's gone up so much and they really have no other place to go, so they got to stay there. I've been asked questions about what can I do to go against my landlord, and there really is nothing. So I think a committee for this is great. I think affordable housing is, to what Ms. Newhall said earlier, Reverend Newhall, affordable is different to everybody. Is it a young couple? Is it that just starting out? Is it someone that's homeless? What does affordable mean to you is all different. So I'm all for this and I'll support it.
Other aldermen. Alderman Kamal.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Director Sullivan. I just had a quick question about something you said when you were describing the membership. And I'm just curious if you envision the role of the chair and the vice chair more as facilitators, why not make them non-voting members then?
It's a very appropriate question, and one that we certainly had some debate about internally. Despite the fact that I do very much view them as being in that facilitation role, I do think that both the Economic Development Director and the Community Development Director, in their subject matter expertise, are qualified to make recommendations. And as a result, we did recommend them as voting members. So I don't want to devalue that expertise by saying that it's facilitating only. I mean to say that during the committee's deliberations, they'll serve in that function, but I do think that they're positioned well to actually make recommendations.
Excellent, thank you.
Alderman Clemens.
So I'm reading the the legislation right now, and for the mayoral appointments, it does say that will be appointed by the mayor, and there's a period after that. So I mean, I would think that it would be our best practice to say in each one of those that it's appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the Board of Aldermen. And so actually, I'm going to make a motion to amend that. I believe it's items under 1245, 1245A, number 2, 3, 4, and 5, that we add to each one of those, and will be appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the Board of Aldermen. And so that is my motion.
Motion is to amend. Subject to?
Subject to the confirmation.
Yes, so will be appointed by the mayor, subject to confirmation of the Board of Aldermen.
Okay. Everyone's heard the amendment. Any questions? Discussion. Alderman Clemens.
So if I could speak to that. So basically what this does is it puts us in alignment with our current practices, where, especially where this committee, so anyone that got appointed would come and go through this process that we have here, and it would follow that regular process, which is our standard practice for most committees, so.
Okay. Alderman Lopez.
I was just going to ask Director Cummings and Sullivan, sorry, if they had any objections, but I also heard Director Cummings just stage wished for a correction, so do you have any concerns about us confirming members of the board committee?
I'll go first, Director Tim Cummings. No problems whatsoever. In fact, I thought that language had already been included, so I welcome the addition.
Alderman Greely.
Thank you, and I absolutely agree with what you just said. When I was looking at it, and I'm just talking to amendments, and I don't know if you can do more than one amendment at a time, but.
Let's talk to the amendment on the floor.
The question I have is, once you make an amendment, can you make another amendment? Or do you have to do all that at once?
You can.
We can further amend, yes.
Well, okay, because I do have a question about the aldermanic person, so I can wait till, as a separate amendment. I just want to make sure that once, I know in the State House, we can only amend like once, so.
Parliamentary, you can make 2 on a motion, that's it, 2 degrees.
2 on a motion. I feel like during barriers, you further amended several times.
We disposed of most of our amendments and then took on
Circled
new
back.
ones.
Alderman Clemmons, knowing that perhaps we only have 2 motions to amend, would you like to hold your motion to amend to get the full discussion?
Well, I think we should take each amendment as they go.
Alderman Dowd is saying that is not parliamentary.
No, that's.
You can pass an amendment and bring up another one. You just can't have an amended amendment as your.
An amended amendment is what you're saying is incorrect. Okay,
Before you
thank
vote on
you.
it.
Sorry.
And my comment does not amend the amendment.
You're not amending the amendment. Let's just vote on this one. Okay, great. Alderman Kamal.
I was just going to say that in the minute Alderman Clemmons was talking, I pulled up some of the NROs, and that's the exact language that's on most of the committees, so I would support that motion if I had a vote, which I don't.
Great. All right, the motion is to amend. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. So we have before us an amended 2217. Let's continue with discussions for recommendation of final passage. I'm going to go with committee members first.
Yes, absolutely.
Alderman Lopez.
To Director Cummings or Alderman Sullivan, I mean, I don't want to downgrade you there. Director Sullivan.
What just happened?
I just docked his pay significantly. So affordable housing isn't used anywhere on this? Is that term inaccurate?
Yeah, the basic answer is that this committee and the fund is intended to include allocations that may go beyond the scope of affordable housing. That's intended to be flexible and speaks to also some of the public comments that we heard at the beginning of this evening. You'll see that there's specific contemplation within some of the whereases here of projects where providing affordable housing is complicated by other site components or other economic factors. And so ultimately, this committee may be considering within its guidelines projects that are not strictly affordable housing.
I think that's important to understand, if I may. I think that's important to understand because I think a lot of people in the community are looking at this with a very tunnel vision. This is the silver bullet for low-income housing, and it's been very consistently presented that there's a component of that, and there's a component of what affordable housing is, which might include low-income housing, but you're taking an environmental, holistic approach. This isn't specifically just going to approach that one issue.
Okay, if I may.
Director Cummings.
Again, yes, Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development. I think that that's a very accurate description. What I would suggest is I do believe that the affordability aspects is going to play an oversized role. I think it's going to be a significant portion of the work, but what we know is twofold. One, we really want this committee to generate the guidelines and to generate the programs that come out of it, and that will be a discussion that is held by the group and I'm sure brought before you on various occasions to discuss. The second element of this is we will be following all the planning work that has been done, and we have a housing plan that was done that articulates certain recommendations. We would be looking at that type of document to help steer us in the course of direction as we start to fill out the programs. So one example, and Director Sullivan mentioned it, from time to time, this group could be the group to steward a home ownership type program to help, with home ownership. There wouldn't necessarily be a strict affordability component to that type of programming, but a housing trust fund would be an appropriate place for this community to look to be the place where the resources were available to fund such a program. So I wanted to kind of further add some additional details to that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Alderman Clemens, is that a follow-up?
Yeah, I wanted to speak to the legislation in general. I wanted to say, that I think it's good legislation. We have the trust fund was good legislation, and I think it's very similar, although completely different, but very similar in approach to the Downtown Improvement Committee, where you have a significant fund. This one is going to be much more significant, but you have an advisory committee that oversees the funds and oversees what, projects and things like that can be done for it. And I think that's very important. And I think that the makeup of the committee too, I think is very well done. And so, I certainly am going to support it. And to the previous conversation about the affordability aspect, I think leaving it open to be as broad as possible, I think is the right way to go. And I think about my own past experience here on the Board of Aldermen, and I think about the Cotton Mill Square project, which was not strictly an affordable housing project, but it was a 50-50, if you will, project that 50% of that project was income-based housing, and the other 50% of it was market rate. But in order to get that done, the city had to put up some, like a tax freeze. We had to, I think there was some money that had to be put up for that project in order for it to move forward. And so, did it strictly go to affordable housing? No, but half of that building is affordable housing now. So we have to be open, we have to be flexible, we have to be willing to work. And I think with developers who are coming forward and are saying, well, I can do this, but the city's gonna have to put up a little bit. And I think having that understanding, and having that, flexibility to be able to do this, I think is very important. And so I appreciate that approach, and I think that's the right approach.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you again, Madam Chairwoman. The comment that I had, and not being a voting member on this committee, it is just kind of my putting it out there. The aldermanic membership, the aldermanic liaison to this, where the Human Affairs Committee was, and you were quite instrumental in that, the Housing Trust Fund and so on, would it not behoove us to perhaps make it and we've done it for other committees, make it specifically the chair of the Human Affairs Committee, or even a member of the Human Affairs Committee? Because much like community development and so on, it would have that aspect of it. And I see that Director Cummings is kind of wiggling in his chair there, so he wants to comment.
Director Cummings?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I make it a business, I make it a policy not to get in the middle of Board of Aldermen business. So whatever the pleasure of this body is in terms of whether you want it to be the president or the chair of some sort of committee, whatever the pleasure of the body is, I do want a member of the Board of Aldermen to be an active participant, similar to the Downtown Improvement Committee or the Business Industrial Development Authority. We have liaisons, and we would like that.
Alderman Clemmons.
Excuse
Oh.
me.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes, yes, please. Thank you. And the only reason why that I brought that up was like, I think a member from the Human Affairs Committee kind of has that expertise and the knowledge of, for instance, the trust fund, the need within the community and so on. And I think the Human Affairs Committee deals a lot with it. That's why I thought that they would be more beneficial than to maybe put somebody from Committee on Infrastructure, which that may too. Again, this is the pleasure of that committee member. And I just wanted to add something that is related to what Alderman Clemmons had brought up before. I like the broad definition of affordable housing and so on. Our inclusionary zoning, and perhaps one of the two directors that are sitting there looking over this way that I think helps with adding to that trust fund, as well as to ensure that we do have affordable housing within all new large developments. Am I correct on that?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. I mean, having that ordinance in place was a tremendous step forward that will not only create affordable housing units, but will in some cases actually contribute dollars and cents to this very fund. And so you're absolutely right. That was a critical component of implementation as well.
So again, just to the human affairs, I just think that it lends the expertise to this particular group. So, but it's your decision as to whether or not you would want to make that amendment.
Alderman Clemmons?
I would leave it more general, as opposed to appointing somebody from a particular committee. And the only reason that I say that is because you don't know in the future what expertise might come our way on this board and what committee they may or may not serve on. So if we have somebody on this board that is a housing guru, but they're not on the Human Affairs Committee, we might be kicking ourselves by restricting ourselves to that. So I'm just saying, I think that we leave it, every other appointment or most of them, up to the discretion of the president of the board. We elect the president of the board amongst ourselves to make those hard decisions and to consult with the vice president and other members. And I think that that's how we should leave it.
Good point.
Alderman Lopez.
Since I am the chair of the committee for Human Affairs, I definitely wouldn't feel comfortable making a motion that the chair be inserted into this. I would be more supportive of somebody from Human Affairs liaising with it if there was the sense that there is likely to be a lot of cooperative grant funding or approval, and it would be helpful for someone to come and do that. But I also know that Director Sullivan and Director Cummings are frequent flyers at Human Affairs, so they could just as easily do that. And I think Alderman Clemmons makes a good point that at the end of the day, it's probably better to let the president make those kind of determinations. I have a lot of experience in housing myself, but I wasn't even always on Human Affairs, so.
Great. Alderman Dowd.
I agree with Alderman Clemmons.
But not me, okay.
Okay. If the committee is no hands up, I have a number of questions. So I think I'll start with the specific structure and how you came about with it. Did you look at other cities and how they've structured their housing trust fund to inform your decisions on who would be on this?
We did. We certainly looked at best practice in other communities, but we also had some engagement with the housing advocacy community, as well as some of our subject matter experts working in the city, in addition to RKG, who was the city's housing consultant on the housing study and the inclusionary zoning work. We tapped into all of those resources and expertise groups to come up with this strategy. Obviously, the 7 is sort of the perfect effective group number, so we happened to land on that, but we felt it was critical to bring in particularly sort of this lived experience representative as well, who's a member of a low-income community, but also felt it important to sort of have that advocacy role serving with the group as well. So it was sort of the perfect balance, I think, of technical experts and also those who've experienced this type of issue directly, and ultimately this is where we landed.
Okay. Question 2, thank you. There were a couple of members that I had question marks around, and one was the lawyer. I know you said there will be some things coming forward, but generally we have counsel in City Hall, so sort of wondering, do we need that?
I think that we do, and specifically, Madam Chair, I believe that an attorney with dedicated experience to putting together these types of affordable housing projects is really what we were looking to. Certainly, Corporation Counsel has a breadth of expertise and very general expertise But this is really somebody who is dedicated to real estate law. And the language may not specifically say that, but that's who we'd be looking for as an appointment. These are very complex deals when it comes to the larger projects, not so much so with some of these home ownership programs that we're talking about. But we do anticipate that the Housing Trust Fund will contribute significant dollars to large, complex deals like the Cotton Mill project, and those simply require a different level of legal expertise that we don't necessarily feel Corporation Counsel will have the capacity to provide all of their expertise to this. They will certainly play a role, though, with when and if we have projects targeted and selected.
Okay.
And if I may, Madam Chair, and similar points with why we want the finance individual.
The finance I got, that made a lot of sense.
Yeah, you know, these are unique, sometimes these are very unique deals. You need to have someone with some understanding of both debt and equity and how it comes together in terms of how these projects are put together.
Okay, completely understand that. My next question was around housing subject matter experts, which you had said. I was surprised we didn't have someone who was in like building materials or development or an architect or, you know, some of those things that can weigh in on, you know, what an affordable housing unit might look like, what the materials are like, what types of things people are doing in the industry.
Well, I have an answer. I'm going to contradict the answer I just gave. I actually think we have access to some of those folks right now that may be able to, particularly within the community development department, may be able to lend their expertise to this as sort of, again, a non-voting but subject matter expert that may be pulled into certain conversations. So I think we have some of those folks even on the city's existing team. But there were contemplations of those very areas of expertise. But I'll let Director comment.
If I could actually, before you answer,
yeah.
Had you considered the new Carrie Skeena as a potential non-voting member? So much information and thought.
We did consider that, and frankly, we had even gone so far as to suggest that rather than the planning department, the urban programs department be the dedicated staff to this committee. Ultimately, we landed on not necessarily recommending that, but certainly I think that new Carrie Skeena, if you will, as you put it, Madam Chair, they will play an active role, I believe, in providing expertise and testimony to this committee when and if formed.
Director Cummings, you had an.
The only thing I was going to add on, Madam Chair, is so this committee is going to be developing programming for housing very specifically, and I wouldn't want it to be confused to subvert our other process that we have in place. We have a site plan process, we have the zoning process, we have a building process, and so this group of people are going to be really focused narrowly on developing housing policy, housing programming, and making sure that we are trying to achieve our housing goals.
Okay, great. So my next question is, I'm interested in, I don't want to make it so narrow that it'll be hard for you guys to get the committee members, but I feel that it's important that these people are Nashua residents wherever possible, because not to say we're particularly different than lots of places, but I think our specific housing concerns and knowing that as a lived experience will be really important to the committee. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll just go first, Madam Chair. Again, Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development. I completely agree with you. I think in my mind it would be a non-starter. We would definitely have every ambition to try to have not only a Nashua person, but someone who's very familiar with the market for those reasons. It's not necessarily codified here in the ordinance. I think it's would be understood. With that being said, the finance professional, the attorney, it's volunteerism. If that person happened to live outside of Nashua, but they understood the Nashua market, I think that's one we would want to make sure that we took that into consideration. That's why we didn't want it to be too narrowly tied.
I would just say if we had equally qualified individuals, certainly I think we would prefer to have the one with direct Nashua experience and that context be the appointee, but we've contemplated something more broad in the event that we don't have someone positioned well to serve in that role.
So would you be open to adding Nashua residents whenever possible?
Yes, I would say so. Yeah. See no reason why not.
Okay, great. So my last piece is around two staff members running this. I know you guys are very qualified. I trust you guys. I've learned a ton from you. I do worry about, if staff members are running this and the community's coming to the conversation, are they going to feel as though they're going to have equal voice in these conversations?
Yeah, no, happy to. I mean, it's not uncommon for staff to run committees. I'd like to believe that as professional staff here to the city, we oftentimes play a facilitator role, and we have to act as a way where we not only support, we encourage all voices to be heard when they come around a table. That doesn't mean that we don't act in our role, sometimes chairing committees. I'm chair of the TIF, the Tax Increment Financing Committee. I'm chair of the Revolving Loan Fund Committee. Those are two just off of the top of my head, and essentially, as Director Sullivan commented, it's really more about the organizational aspects of it, the logistical coordination, it's the technical assistance that you can provide, and then ultimately, you're trying to develop consensus. You're really trying to help bring about what the group consensus is, so you can then implement it. And by having that leadership role, you're able to more fully and better execute for the city.
I would just add, before I say what I'm about to say, that I'm not meaning to imply that any of the folks here are not sensitive, objective, or inclusive, but the intent was to have staff members be the chair and vice chair of this, was really to ensure that those three values were protected within the process, that there was a sensitivity, that there was clear direction and objectivity, and to ensure that we were being very sensitive to the varying and diverse needs of the folks that were on the committee. I think there are other ways that the leadership could be contemplated. I'll be quite honest about that, but we felt ultimately that serving as chair and vice chair was the most effective way to accomplish those objectives.
Okay, thank you. I just had a logistical question, and I don't know if maybe one of the more tenured aldermen will know the answer, but we're going to say we approve the $10 million that goes off. Are you guys still required to bring it back to us if you say, okay, we're going to put $5,000 in such and such project? Does it still work that way?
If I may, it's through a contract. So it would be it could be a separate piece of legislation that would be part of some sort of agreement, which again is a contract, or if it was a very specific program that had financial terms to it and it was a contract, then it would definitely go through Finance Committee.
Great. That was my one other big piece. Alderman Clemens.
Thank you. You brought up a very good point, Madam Chair. I would support making sure that the resident is a Nashua, absolutely 100% Nashua resident. So if you look at number 2, which is one member shall be a resident of a low-income neighborhood, a low-income community resident, and I think it's implied there, but I would certainly
that's where I was
add
The city of Nashua.
of the city of Nashua to that. I think I would caution, though, even saying something along the lines of whenever possible for the other positions, and the only reason that I say that is because if you have 2 qualified candidates and the better person is from Manchester, and we really want to go with the guy from Manchester or the woman from Manchester, I wouldn't want there to be somebody, I wouldn't want there to be somebody to interpret the language as saying, well, we have to go with, because you have 2 qualified candidates, even though one is more than the other. So I guess from that point of view, I would not be supportive of that, but certainly for the resident, I think we should make that very, very clear.
So I think that's a valid point, and that was actually one of the places I was looking specifically. I guess my concern is advocacy group. It is someone who might be a member of an advocacy group in Concord or Berlin going to really understand what's going on here. And while I defer to the mayor and the committee, I'm sure they'll do their hardest to bring people who know the region, but I just wanted to make sure it was put out there and discussed, because we have a lot of housing, very unique housing concerns here in the city, and they're complicated. Alderman Lopez.
So first, I would support Alderman Clemens' amendment if he chooses to make it. But I want to get a little bit more background information. In terms of the city's makeup, this is a very awkward question to those directors, but do either of you live in Nashua?
No.
No. So for me, that concrete set is at least one person should really be, other than the aldermanic liaison, should definitely be a Nashua resident. Second, both appointees as chair and vice chair are absolute, but earlier in the legislation, it mentions membership as being either the director or their designee. So what happens if you guys designate somebody, but then you have to show up anyway?
The short answer is that it's the director or their designee, and so that designee action would not be singular for a meeting. Obviously, it would be something that would have to have more term to it, and something that I think ultimately would have to be approved by the mayor if there is to be a designee at all. But it would not be a sort of filling in as need be kind of arrangement, Alderman.
What I was thinking more was you can't have a designee because you're named as chairs and vice chairs. Should we add or designee?
Oh, you're talking
You
about further,
certainly
I know what
could.
you're saying.
I don't think it's.
Like in I don't know how these words work, but let's see. In
1246.
Yeah, in 1246, it literally just identifies you as chairpersons instead of saying or their respective designees.
Gotcha. Right.
That's where it would go.
If I could, I can make that, I'm going to go ahead and make an amendment unless there's more discussion. Okay, so I'm going to recommend, or move to amend number 1245-2 to read.
A2.
Is that what?
Yep. A2.
A2?
After the word A in the first line, insert the word Nashua.
Yeah, that's what I was, A2, yeah.
I do this for a living.
Great, good job, I'm tired.
Can you repeat
But
that?
then also under,
Can you repeat that so I can get it
Yep.
exactly right?
he says A2, but there's different areas, so A2, Nashua before resident. So it would read, one member shall be a Nashua resident of a low-income neighborhood, blah, 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 blah. You can put that in the record.
Put all the blah, blah, blahs in.
I prefer the
I think the further amendment here is under 1246, the Community Development Division Director or designee shall serve as chairperson with the Economic Development Director or designee as vice chairperson. Is that correct? All right, that is the amendment. Alderman Camo.
Yes, thank you. I just had a quick question through you to either of the directors. Since we started talking about this A2, I'm wondering if you can explain to me what is the difference between a resident of a low-income neighborhood and a low-income community resident?
Specifically, what was contemplated with the low-income community meant sort of a contained development area, whereas within a low-income neighborhood, it's more of a nebulous terminology that's not necessarily bounded strictly. And so that was the intent of that language. May not be that clear in the language necessarily, but that was the contemplation there. Alderman Camo.
A quick follow-up, Madam Chair.
Alderman Camo.
And then the third part of that same item where it says, or an elected representative of a low-income neighborhood, do I take that to mean that somebody like my colleague from Ward 4 could serve in that role as an elected representative of a low-income neighborhood?
I would not say that Alderman Lopez himself as an alderman could serve, but the community could essentially come together, or a structured community or association or the like could come together to appoint someone. But I do not believe the way the legislation is written today that a member of the Board of Aldermen could serve in that specific position. It would have to be more of an ad hoc committee that would ultimately, or community rather, that would ultimately appoint this person.
Thank you.
I'm not sure that that's clear. I read it the exact same way.
I did the same time.
Yeah, Alderman Lopez.
Could we, since we are amending, and we can go too deep only, could we add for the purposes of joining the committee to elected?
I would also argue it doesn't need to be there. The scenario you just laid out, it seems fairly unlikely.
Unlikely.
Like, it's not, we're not saying it's a state rep, it's like someone has to come, I would strike it if we think it's too confusing. Alderman Glee.
Thank you. I would agree with striking it because ultimately it's going to be the mayor that's going to be making an appointment. You're giving him a list of qualifications that he must meet, meaning that it's a Nashua resident of a low-income neighborhood or I assume a Nashua resident of a low-income community resident, but to say an elected means that a whole nother body gets together, makes the appointment, and then what if the mayor says no?
Nah.
Exactly, so I think to Alderman Camo's point, probably just saying maybe a Nashua resident of a low-income neighborhood or low-income community, if you wanted to put both of those as descriptors, but to add on the other body of that text, it kind of gives the implication that a community can come together and say, we want this person, and then the mayor goes, nah.
Yeah.
You know, I think it would kind of leave it up to a lot of.
I agree. Alderman Dowd, I almost called her Alderwoman.
For the benefit and sanity of the transcriber, can you articulate the current pending amendment?
Yes. The current pending amendment is to change A2 to one member shall be a Nashua resident of a low-income neighborhood or low-income community resident. The current conversation is to then pull off or will be appointed by the or an elected official of a low-income neighborhood organization. And then we, under 1246 chairperson bylaws, would like to add or designate after the community development division director and economic development director.
Thank you. Did I say that? Because
I don't know if I was more clear. I might not have been. If it's the pleasure of this board, I would like to strike an elected representative of a low-income neighborhood organization.
Yeah, I say that because Donna has about 10 inches of transcription. The easier we can make it for her, the better.
Yeah, and they do get a little messy, so that's fair. She works hard. Okay. Alderman Glee.
Just again, for clarification, as Alderman Dowd pointed out, you're saying one member shall be a Nashua resident of a low-income neighborhood or a low-income community? So you're going to put the word "or" in there.
Correct.
And then strike out from the word "or" an elected official organization to the word organization, leaving "and will be appointed by the mayor."
Correct.
Okay.
So the fully amended number 2 would say, one member shall be a Nashua resident of a low-income neighborhood or low-income community resident and will be appointed by the mayor.
Subject to the.
Oh, right, that's right, the previous, subject to approval by the Board of Aldermen. Thank you. Okay, is everyone clear on the amendment?
And then
Uh-oh.
1246.
Oh, I thought I clarified
Yeah, well,
that.
yeah, I think we already.
Huh?
So I think we're like tiered now. You just.
No,
made
it's
another
all one
amendment?
it's all
It's all
one
one
motion.
motion.
It's all
Okay,
one motion.
we're good.
It's all one.
All right.
It's my, yeah, I can end it. Okay. Everyone understands the amendment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That amendment carries. Okay. Any additional conversations? Thoughts? Okay, so then we would like to move for recommended final passage of the amended 0217. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. I thought you were gonna oppose you. You raised your hand. Okay, thank you very much for being here and walking us through. This is a really important trust fund and the committee, and I'm really eternally grateful for all the work, and I know it's gonna be really important to the development of the city.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I know Director Cummings is not going anywhere.
I'm not, I'm right here for the next.
Stick around.
Yeah,
Please,
stick around.
please, join us.
Okay. Last piece of legislation.
I'd like to make a motion for final passage of O-22-018, amending aldermanic joint committees.
All right, the motion is to recommend final passage of O-22-18. Alderman Dowd, is this your piece of legislation? Oh, Alderman O'Brien,
Yeah, usually
that's why you're here.
it's the
Okay.
first name, yes.
I missed
Stayed
it.
up late for this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is, I hate to use the term, but basically it's a house cleaning type of a bill. It's very friendly. Exactly what's pretty much happening now is going to happen after this. This will just codify it. If we look back to the history of the city of Nashua, somebody decided to change the name. I hated when we went from Nashua Fire Department to Fire Rescue, because I says, what, we never rescued anybody before? But somebody felt a lot better in changing the stationery. So anyways, the thing is, this is what happened. The committee of what was formerly known as Lands and Buildings became the Committee of Infrastructure. That being said, that means there's a lot of buildings and a lot of groups. And I think as Rick Dowdy's chairman of the Building Joint Special Committee with the school department, and they're very busy in renovating and building brand new schools and the like and everything. But what about the other city property? And that comes down to police stations, fire stations, and other different types of venues. Now, over the years, somehow somebody didn't do their diligence and it got slipped away from the infrastructure committee. This basically keeps where the power should be and where the purse strings actually are. The purse strings come from the Board of Aldermen. So therefore, we need to have representation from the Board of Aldermen, let's say in the example, to work with the police department if they wanted to renovate their particular structure or something like that. So again, it's basically what's doing now, it's just codifying it, and hopefully it doesn't need any amendment and you pass it, for I feel this is friendly. Thank you.
Alderman Dowd.
Okay, just a couple points. He's correct that when we got into the DPW building, we sat down and between Alderman O'Brien, myself, Lisa Foto, and Director Cummings, we structured the building of the DPW building, the committees, similar to but not exact to what the Joint Special is. And I say that because the Joint Special is set up by the state. And it's a 10-member committee, 5 from the Board of Aldermen, 5 from the Board of Education. And the spending authority completely lies within the Joint Special. We have a $120+ million project, and the spending is approved and spent out of the Joint Special. This is not quite like that because the committee recommends the changes and ultimately the money spent through the Finance Committee. But the building decisions are made similar with PCOs and PCCOs, which prospective change orders, and anyway. So that part of the process is working the same. The interface with the construction manager, which is Harvey, and the architect is the same pretty much as the Joint Special. It's just that the spending is a little different. And I reviewed this legislation that was written by Attorney Leonard, and it's right on. I think it's perfect. And don't say that too often with any legislation. I think this one nails it. And so whenever we build a fire station, or we're building a police station, we may be building some of those in the foreseeable future. And this, the DPW building, it's the Infrastructure Committee and the, whether it's the Board of Fire Commissioners, the Police Commissioners, or the DPW. So, and it's working out very well with the DPW building, so that's what we tried to codify in this legislation. And as I said again, Attorney Leonard did a great job putting this together.
Great. Madam Chair, if I may, and just agree, I agree 100% with Alderman Dowd. You got to realize the city is growing and there'll be other projects in the future. So this is, again, noteworthy to do this at this particular time when future development does occur.
Basically, we just didn't want to keep reinventing the wheel, so we
Exactly.
codified it.
Questions for committee? You guys have your hands up for pets, but not this.
I don't have any good questions.
Alderman Clemmons.
No, I support the legislation. I think it just clarifies what we need to do in the future and to codify a good practice, so I think it's something I will support.
Great. Anyone else? Recommend on the floor is to recommend, sorry, the motion on the floor is to recommend final passage. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your additions.
Tabled in committee.
There is none.
Would anyone like to give public comment? There's no one in the chamber. There is one person, but he's not rising. I apologize. And is there anyone on Zoom? No? Okay, great. General discussion? We discussed a lot this evening, but you're welcome to bring them up. Remarks by Alderman? Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just want to thank everybody for coming out for the interviews tonight. Very impressive group of people, and I think that's worth our time to listen to them and to be able to ask them questions. The other thing I wanted to mention, I wasn't going to mention it, but I saw him pop on and pop off of the Zoom earlier. Scotty, and maybe Scotty McCulloch, and maybe Alderman Lopez will want to say something about this as well, as the Best Buddies Walk is coming up. But I saw Scotty on there, and I just want to say the parade on Memorial Day was fantastic, and Scotty was on the sidelines, and probably the best part of the parade is when he came and gave me a giant hug out of the blue, and he said, finally we get to meet. So I thought that was awesome, and I just wanted to say shout out to him. I know he jumped on and off. He had his hand up for a brief few seconds, and then I didn't want to hang around, but that's okay. I just wanted to say that was a great moment, and the Best Buddies Walk is this week, and I think people can still donate. I'll let, obviously, Alderman Lopez talk about that, but thank you.
Other remarks? Alderman Lopez?
So the Best Buddy Walk is on Saturday morning. If anybody would like to donate, I recommend focusing on Scott's fundraiser just to keep all the bookkeeping simple. I will be attending. If anybody would like to give me a ride, that would be great. And also, I just wanted to express appreciation for Alderman Klee, she and her husband are going through some pretty significant medical challenges, and they're still trying to support the community. So I just wanted to express gratitude and respect for that.
Alderman Klee, then Alderman, well, I see you.
Thank you very much, Alderman Lopez. Yes, I will be there at the Best Buddies Walk. Not sure about my husband, but he's going to try. I did want to thank everybody that came out for the interviews. We had an amazing group of people. I was so proud that a couple of them were from Ward 3. As always, I'm so proud of my ward. I also want to announce, and I've been putting this out as much as I can, there is going to be a cleanup at the Salem Street Tot Lot. It really needs a lot of TLC. The Public Works has dropped off bags for me. They've dropped off some heavy duty gloves for those that are going to need something like that. I will be providing the non-latex gloves as well as bottled water. The weather looks a little iffy on Sunday, so I have no rain date right now. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we at least have that window from 9 a.m. to 12. I did put on Facebook an event type thing that does have a map of how you can get to the Salem Street Tot Lot. It's not quite as easy as it looks. It is on Salem Street next to Tolles, in between Whitney and Locke. But if anybody has any questions, send me an email. I will send you the little GIS map that will help you find it. If we get enough people, we will also do a little bit more in the surrounding area. The Nashua Police Department is going to do their best also to be sending people so that the community understands that the police aren't just there to parole and to sometimes make life uncomfortable as they feel, but our police, especially Officer Howe, is part of that community. He may not live there, but he is very dedicated to that community, as are some of the other Nashua police. I spoke at the Crime Watch meeting about some of the issues that were happening there, and they're going to do their very best to be there, and I'm so proud to have our Nashua PD there. So I'd love to have more community, not just those that live there, but beyond those borders of French Hill, to come out and to help. It speaks volumes to the people that live there. So thank you so much for letting me speak.
Do you ever sleep?
As they say, when I
And
die.
by that, I mean, I appreciate your dedication.
When I die, yes. It'll be a long nap then.
Alderman Kamal, you were next.
Yes, thank you. My colleagues from Wards 3 and 8 took the words out of my mouth, but I wanted to thank the people that came tonight to interview. I think in this age of social media, it's easy to think that everybody just hates you and everything that you do and complains about the job that we do, so it's nice to know that there's people in the community that want to go that next step beyond just recognizing that something's wrong and taking those steps to get involved and be part of the solution instead of, the alternative. So I just want to thank them for getting involved and being a part of the team.
Great. I'm going to end by just a note on the Housing Trust Fund. Thank everyone for passing and also really giving some attention to that. So, because it is such an important issue that we're facing in Nashua, and this committee will be instrumental in helping us move along, what we want to see in our city and how we want to use the funds that we allocate as a board. So I was really excited to see that happen. So anyone else? All right, do I have a motion? Alderman Clemens.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We
You're not
are adjourned
opposed?
at 9:50 PM. Thank you, everyone.
All right.